Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Election Day version of the Post Falls City Council meeting. Rhiannon, please note that all council members are in attendance with the exception of Councilor Walker, who is attending via Teams or Zoom or whatever we're using these days. We don't have councilors call in, but Councilor Shove had to resign because he moved out of the area, and so not knowing if we were going to have a full contingent of councilors, we asked Councilor Walker to join us. And I think, Josh, maybe just even if you can only stay through the first part of the meeting, and if you're going to leave, because I know you're not feeling well, I would suggest you probably check out before the public hearing starts. So if that makes sense to you. Okay?
Yes.
We do have a couple of announcements. The community is invited to join us for a Housing Needs Open House this Thursday, November 7th from 6 to 8 p.m. here at City Hall. City staff and Camoin Associates will lead a discussion on our current and future housing needs, highlighting key issues and setting priorities for the next 5, 10, and 15 years. This open house is your chance to share your insights and collaborate on creative solutions. And again, it is Election Day. If you haven't voted, please go vote. We'll probably still be here by the time you get back. But it's important that everybody votes. City Hall and city business offices will be closed Monday, November 11th in observance of Veterans Day. Police, fire, and rescue services for life-threatening or in-progress emergencies may be reached by calling 911. The police department will be open for walk-in emergencies, and for water department emergencies, call 208-773-3517. Under ceremonies, announcements, appointments, presentations, we do have actually 3 things tonight. The first is we had a vacancy on a Planning and Zoning Commission, and I would like to ask Council to confirm the appointment of Chris Schreiber to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Rhiannon, please take the roll.
Stigleiter.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. And Mr. Ziegler, we look forward to having you participate with P&Z. And then, as Council, as you know, the next item would be to accept the resignation of Councilor Kenny Shove and declaration of vacancy in Council seat number 6. Kenny has moved out of the area and sent us a formal notice of resignation. So I would ask a motion to accept the resignation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Stigleiter.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. And then the next thing we're going to have tonight's not on the agenda, but as everybody's aware, we had a situation down at the Avista Dam, and I know a warning went out, maybe early, but anyway, Todd Keesby from Avista.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Again, Avista, Todd Kisby with Avista. I'm the regional business manager here in North Idaho. We appreciate the opportunity tonight to give you an update on the incident that occurred last week. Joining me tonight is David Howell. He is with our generation production and substation support, and he's going to provide more of that detail.
All right. Thanks for having me here and providing an opportunity for an update. I have a few prepared words, and then I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have, so I'll just cover that. So Avista recently embarked on a multi-year commitment to rehabilitate the Post Falls Dam spillway, which controls the water level of Lake Coeur d'Alene, and replace the existing powerhouse generation equipment, which was originally installed in 1908, so it's over 115 years old. The powerhouse generates 12 megawatts of clean hydropower, which is enough electricity to power approximately 12,000 homes. We use the spillway to manage water levels on the Lake Coeur d'Alene in the summertime and water runoff in the spring. The first phase of the project includes installing a cofferdam, which is used to make the area safe for employees to complete the rehabilitation work in subsequent years. This is a multi-year project. The cofferdam includes installing multiple steel structures in the river, on the actual riverbed, which will become a temporary bridge that allows a crane to access the work area. So what happened? Just last week, so at approximately 9:15 on Tuesday of last week, Avista's contractor was attempting to set one of the steel structures. We call this a bent, if you've heard that term, but it's a steel structure that you can visibly see in the river. For some reason, the crane operator lost control of the load and the crane flipped over during the lifting operation. And we currently don't know what the cause of that was. It's under investigation. The boom of the crane landed on the spillway at approximately the middle portion of the spillway gates, and the event initiated our temporary construction emergency action plan for a potential dam failure. The emergency action plan includes a predetermined notification protocol based on the type of incident. Avista personnel initiated the notification based on the initial assessment of the situation on scene. The notification includes contacting both internal and external stakeholders and agencies. Upon making the site safe and responding to immediate personnel needs, an inspection was performed by our operations team with a follow-up inspection performed by dam safety personnel at approximately 10:20. So just about an hour it took us to make that assessment, which indicated no immediate threat to the operation of the dam spillway gates or concrete structure, and no release of water was observed. Operations and Dam Safety provided an update via the temporary construction emergency action plan, indicating the dam was safe and not at risk. Since the incident, Avista has been working diligently with stakeholders and partners to remove the crane and return to the prior rehabilitation work. So what are we doing? Related to dam safety, the dam safety assessments have been completed by Avista, our internal engineering groups, multiple external agencies, and our third-party structural consultant. No unsafe structural deficiencies were identified, and the spillway was found safe to operate. Damage sustained to the operating mechanism on one of the middle gates will be repaired and returned to operation before the next spill season. Related to the crane removal, the crane was actually damaged and we had to remove it using a secondary crane. Our contractor mobilized a removal crane. The boom portion was removed in 3 portions yesterday, and then the main body of the crane, which came to rest on the temporary bridge access, was removed today. So we have all of the crane itself out of the river, and then the remaining vent is still in the river, but that will be removed and then replaced later this week. As part of our response to this event, Avista has been communicating with and working with over 25 federal, state, and local agencies to coordinate and communicate our response actions. Our 2 main regulators in this situation are FERC, the Dam Safety Division, and the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality. We have had site visits from our main regulators with no findings, and we will continue to coordinate our restoration response with them and our other stakeholders. Related to the park status, for the duration of the crane restoration activities, a decision was made to close the park and limit access for safety reasons. We anticipate the park will be available to the public following the removal of the crane body, which I'm happy to say happened today. So it should happen later this week, but for sure by next Monday we would be prepared to return to normal park operations that we had prior to the event. Just a couple of thank yous. The staff on site was just very appreciative of the Post Falls Police Department and their response to this incident. It was very timely, and they provided a lot of professional guidance for a situation that's uncommon for us and maybe more common for them. So thank you to them. I see somebody is here. We appreciate that. And then the other thank you is just to the citizens of Post Falls and the surrounding community. We understand the impacts of closing the park and the limited access that had, and appreciate people's patience in that process. So with that, if you have any additional questions.
Yeah, I know that the notification that went out about a potential dam failure spooked a lot of people.
Yeah.
And just for clarity, that wasn't a result of somebody thinking the dam was about to fail. It was part of a response to, hey, this type of incident occurred. We're going to send that out as part of a protocol, right?
Yeah, there's multiple predetermined protocols. We call them, we have an A and a B and a C, different call trees. And our staff uses their discretion to make those notifications. So we had a crane boom laying across the spillway, and they initiated kind of our middle tier, I'll call it, of response. And then included in that is the National Weather Service, which has the option to then use discretion at how they want to respond to that. And that's the notice that we saw. We have had some internal discussions to make sure that that protocol is appropriate for the type of incident that occurred. But in this case, we're very fortunate, essentially the load landed in the river and the boom landed across the spillway, so we didn't see any damage.
Yeah, that's good. Better safe than sorry, for sure.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you.
But we do understand the impact it was personally to me and to others about the notifications, and that is being reviewed.
And the crane operator was injured, is okay? Are there other injuries?
He was injured. The contractor did have a crane operator that sustained, injury to one of his arms. He went through some surgeries, is recovering.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yeah.
I hope he does well.
Yes, thank you.
Unfortunate situation, but appreciate the way it was handled, and as Councilor Stigleiter said, thank goodness he wasn't hurt worse.
Yes. We're very thankful for that.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
we appreciate your follow-up and assurance that the dam is structurally sound. I know I received a letter on that, wanting us to make sure that in fact was the case, and it sounds like you folks have done that with your agency, so thank you very much.
Yeah, and I want to reinforce that we had agencies that have been on site. We have civil engineers internal that are accountable for structural dam safety. We also used a third-party consultant to do a review the next day following the incident. So there's been no findings either through FERC dam safety or internal or third-party analysis.
Good. Well, again, Vista's been a good partner. I think this is just an example of it, and we look forward to continuing to work with you in the future and having the dam done.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for your understanding.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Are there any amendments to the agenda tonight?
There are none tonight, sir.
Any declarations of conflict? Seeing none, would you please present the consent calendar? And by the way, I did text Councilor Walker because I know he was struggling, and since we do have a quorum, I invited him to sign off if he needed to, which he did, so.
Yeah. Okay. Item A is minutes from the October 15th, 2024 City Council meeting. Item B is approval of accounts payables through November 5th, 2024, and a hand check accountability report for October 7th through October 25th, 2024. Item C is approval of the annual Kootenai County Public Transportation payment. Item D is wastewater capacity replacement fee agreement for 3200 North Spokane Street. Item E is approval of the Fair Estates final subdivision plat. And item F is approval of the Coilview Twin Homes final plat.
Any questions on the consent calendar?
I have two
ahead.
questions, if I may. Item C, that's CityLink, is that correct? I don't know who I
That's
should be
correct. That's
looking
the
at for
CityLink
that.
program.
Okay, cool. And then item F, Mr. Manley, those twin homes only share one wall, right? Twin homes on the lot line, so that's not just one block of houses, it's just in that subdivision?
John Manley, planning manager. So yeah, when it comes to twin homes, they
Okay.
do share one common wall. It's a
Just
zero
one
lot
common.
line between twin homes.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, thanks so much.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
I have a question about item D, the wastewater capacity replacement fee agreement. Is this a typical thing that happens when we assess a cap fee and then we find out we underassess it and then have to deal with that later?
I wouldn't say it's typical, but it does happen on occasion. So as we are working with businesses as they're building and constructing, they will give us an estimate, and we do have some industry standards that we go by. They're reviewed through our engineering department, and most of the time, those numbers come out fairly close. On occasion, we have someone who is either under or over, and if they're under, then they would get a reimbursement of the overreach of cap fees that they paid. When they're over, then they get a bill for that difference for the cap fees that they're using. We also have Metro Car Wash right now is currently going through a similar thing where they are using more than they originally paid for when they came online. So they are negotiating right now with how to make the payments on those. And this one is for the Prairie
Falls.
Falls.
Right. So the initial estimate is done by the developer for wastewater they use, or is
Between
that something we
engineering and
do?
the developer, yes. So some of the times it may be an industry that we don't have a standard for. And if it's a restaurant, typically we do, but this one is a golf course, restaurant, and hotel, so it was a combination of those three. And it came in higher than what we expected and they expected.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. And just as a side note, our finance director has requested that we reevaluate how we do those. So I did receive that a couple of days ago. So we're going to be looking at those again, how we set those standards when we calculate the number for the initial cap fees that are being paid.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. We don't want to end up doing things that look like interest-free loans to a lot of people, so
Yes.
that's good.
Well, and it was nice to, I don't think we've always, maybe we have, but it seems like it was only a few years ago that we started letting them catch up over time, because to have to write a check like that would be significant. So
Yeah.
it's a good, you're right, you don't want interest-free loans, but it's a good alternative.
Yeah.
Entertain a motion if there's no further questions.
I would move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland,
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next up tonight is public hearings, and we do have one. A lot of folks here to testify. If you do wish to testify, there's a form in the back podium. Please fill it out, turn it in to Rhiannon, and we'll listen to you. And before we start, a couple ground rules. Anybody that wishes to speak, we're going to listen to you. We're going to listen to you with respect. We're not going to interrupt. If someone is speaking and you don't agree with them, do not call out, do not boo, do not applaud someone that you're happy with. I like to tell people this is a council chamber, is not a gymnasium, but let's treat everybody with respect, even if we don't agree, and we're going to get through this, and everybody will have their say. So with that, I will open the North Place Subdivision public hearing. Mr. Manley.
Yes, good evening, John Manley, planning manager here at the city. Introducing the North Place East 2024 preliminary plat subdivision appeal, file number issue BD 23-7. So the owner is Schneimel Brothers, Inc. The applicant is Kevin Schneimler. As you see there, they are requesting to subdivide approximately 238 acres and change into about 1,125 lots. It is currently zoned residential mixed, and they're proposing to develop this consistent with the approved residential mix zone change development agreement. So as a side note, with development agreements, they kind of act as a contract zoning. So not only do you look at the underlying zoning, which is RM, there's a contract between city council, the city, and the landowner on how that may develop. The Planning and Zoning Commission did approve on August 13th the subdivision. They did, as part of that, there was a bit of a contentious matter where they desired to restrict some multifamily on Lot 7, which I'll show through this presentation where that's located. You did see in Exhibit S7 in the staff report some recommendation on that approval that did remove that condition, and that's why we're here tonight, is the appeal on mostly that matter. Looking at, this is a new hearing though, so as stated in the next statement there, staff does request City Council to evaluate the testimony and evidence in the public hearing and process and see that it meets the subdivision criteria in the subdivision code in Title 17. Project location is, as you see here, it is the fairly large red area there, southeast corner of Prairie and Idaho Street. Currently, it's a large undeveloped lot, as I stated, zoned RM. Water provider, there is 2 water providers for the site. Everything west of Syringa is the city of Post Falls, and everything east would be the Ross Point Water District. Sewer would be provided by the city of Post Falls. There you see the zoning map of the area. You can see everything north of Prairie is mostly 5-acre lots in the county. You do see some larger lots there. Everything in the city to the west and south predominantly is the R1 zoning, single-family zoning. To the east, what you see is, to the northeast corner, you do see there's a commercial node in the comp plan. You do see some of that mix of commercial there to the northeast. To the east, you do see 1 5-acre lot that's R1 with a residential mix zone to the east. The other lots adjacent are also 5-acre lots in the county. Here is the proposed subdivision plan. You see there, their proposal. The typical lot size is to the left of that. I did zoom in a little bit so you can see there's their mix of typical lot sizing. We did look at these to see if they would be consistent with the RM zone and be applicable. Staff did see that being consistent with the zoning ordinance, Title 18 for an RM. You do see that it is identified that some lots may vary for this, but we would look to as the phases being consistent with the RM and that mentioned development agreement. In that development agreement, I did want to note, we did look at this subdivision in review, and we did look at, do they meet the mid-block walkways? So as they proposed, we went through this project and we looked for mid-block walkways. I believe we did identify through our staff review in this area the need for an additional mid-block walkway, which they did upon final submittal, so they would be consistent with the development agreement requirement on their submittal. Additionally, you see here the 1,400 dwelling units. I have that highlight underlined in red. That was a condition that was applied by City Council. The applicant, which they can speak to it, I believe intend to be consistent with that or less, and be as they phase this development going forward. Looking at the regulation plan, this is where you can see where the subdivision would be reviewed against. Is it generally consistent with the bubble map attached to this development agreement? You can see here, this is one of the conditions in that 5.210, multifamily uses are limited to 2 stories. So where you do see the MF, they are capped at 2 stories. They're not the 3-story multifamily units. But this is kind of the area you see the mix of 3 different types, 2 different types of single family and the multifamily at that location. And then you see their single family either attached or detached there. Along Syringa, which is your north-south connector street, you do see that the development agreement was approved with some higher intensities along it and along the intersection of Penrose. And then everything to the east and adjacent to Fieldstone was single family, either attached or detached. That was part of that development agreement. You can see in their plat layout, I'll go back a little bit. This one here, you can see they did plan these larger lots. If you compare these lots up here at this location, which I believe the applicant does have potential for some multifamily there, and here the reason for the large lots that's common when you're planning for multifamily would generally correspond with that development agreement map. So you can see that they're looking at that and they're trying to apply their lotting pattern accordingly. So now moving into the review criteria, the first review criteria is, can you provide water to the site? And you can see that the city did comment on that we can provide from the city side, and that there's a will serve letter from Ross Point Water that water can be provided to this site. Looking at sanitary sewer system, you cited in the staff report, sewer can be provided to the site and meet the needs of the subdivision. Looking at the proposed streets, and are they consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan? Generally, a lot of times I comment on this, but being the case, I believe if Mr. Paulus, the city engineer, could come up and speak to this next few slides would probably be best.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Robert Paulus, city engineer. When looking at this site and with the large acreage on it, some of the questions that came up previously was, why for such a large area did we not have a traffic study done on the property, and how would it or not impact the adjoining properties and roadway network? One of the things we've done historically with our transportation master plans is we try to set them up in a way that if development occurs in line with how we see growth and density for the properties, that we want to try to avoid having unnecessary traffic studies done. If we can foresee the problems and areas to do further analysis and take care of that with the transportation plan, that can save time and money for the developers and hopefully help in the cost of housing as well. For this property, the main roads that were affected were Idaho Street, Greens Ferry Road, Prairie Avenue, and Syringa Road. And this project being surrounded by those areas, the densities and land use types were in accordance with what we have in our transportation master plan. On Prairie Avenue, we currently have around 3,400 vehicle trips per day on there. They have a volume to capacity ratio in its current configuration of 0.57. What that means is that it's operating at about 57% of its full road capacity. By 2035, we anticipate that Prairie Avenue is going to be built out to a 5-lane road section. This project would be responsible for building their share of the frontage improvements of that road improvement, which would be the south half of Prairie Avenue from Idaho Street to Greens Ferry Road, well, to within 660 feet of Greens Ferry Road, and would not include signal improvements at Greens Ferry and Prairie or intersection improvements at Idaho and Prairie. If improvements are not in by 2035, the model shows that on Prairie Avenue, we would be up around 90% volume to capacity, or pretty much at full capacity of that road. People will tend to see a degradation in their ability to move freely on that roadway and not experience congestion once you start to hit about 75% capacity. That's why we need to have Prairie Avenue 5 lanes by 2035. Greens Ferry Road, we anticipate it, right now it is in a 3-lane section north of Bogey Drive. We anticipate it to stay that same way, and right now it's operating at about 31% of capacity, and by 2035 it's going to be at about 47% capacity. We don't see any big issues on Greens Ferry Road at this time. I'm going to talk about Syringa Street last, but jumping over to Idaho Street, kind of a similar vein. Currently, it's operating at about 27% capacity, and by 2035, we anticipate it to be at 40% capacity. So that 3-lane road has capacity. Even if we were off a little bit in our assumptions with traffic patterns from the subdivision, or even if it had slightly greater density than we anticipated, there's enough additional capacity out there to handle what could occur on this property and adjoining properties in the area with background growth. On Syringa Street, we currently have about 2,000 vehicles per day from Bogey Drive down to Pole Line Avenue. If you take a look, it's showing that it's at 15% capacity today. One person brought up a good point. When we look at Syringa Street, it's listed as a minor collector roadway. Minor collector roadways have a desired capacity of 1,500 vehicles to 5,000 vehicles per day. And they said, well, you're at 15% capacity. 2,000 vehicles is a lot more than 15%. The City of Post Falls utilizes on minor collectors and major collectors a desired capacity as to how much traffic we want to see on that road. On the minor collector, we want to see up to 5,000. On the major collector, we want to see up to 12,000 vehicles per day. If you go in and do the mathematics and the transportation engineering stuff on that, a 3-lane roadway in either a minor or a major collector standard can handle 12,000 vehicles per day. But we don't want to see Syringa up and that busy of a roadway because of the nature of the development in that area. So we anticipate Syringa Street by 2035 to be a little bit closer to 3,000 vehicles per day. Still well below the 5,000 trips, and still well within the comfort area of what we want to see a minor collector doing. Looking a little bit more at the subdivision itself, Penrose Avenue, as it's listed in the subdivision, it's Hope Avenue when it gets east of Greens Ferry Road, is listed as a major collector roadway and is going to be extended from Greens Ferry Road all the ways to Idaho Street through this subdivision. Yes.
Can you explain how Penrose is a major collector and you said Syringa is a minor collector?
Yes.
Syringa seems like a very, very well-used road, whereas I feel like Penrose is probably not.
So Penrose right now is not a really heavily used roadway.
Mm-hmm.
When we get to build out from this subdivision, our anticipation is we're going to be on the very low end of a major collector roadway for Penrose.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2004, and then again when we updated our transportation plan in 2017, we took Hope Avenue and we identified it as this was a desired location for it to be a major collector roadway because it would provide a connection from Idaho Street all the ways out to State Highway 41 where there's a traffic signal, so that we would anticipate maybe some higher traffic usage on that roadway. Now, the thing that's going to reduce some of that traffic is that if you go that route, we're projecting a future traffic signal at Hope and Greens Ferry, but you also have 25-mile-per-hour roadways on Hope as you make your way from Greens Ferry out to Highway 41. It's not as desirable of a route as Prairie Avenue, which is going to be 40, 45 miles per hour. Future traffic studies could lower that to a lower level, but right now it's posted at 45. And then Poline Avenue would also be a more desirable route to get over to Highway 41.
And Penrose was built, the section that's currently there was built to a major collector standard, even with that median, because it's only a 2-lane road, correct?
It's only a 2-lane road. A major collector roadway, there's a number of different configurations in it. Both a minor collector and a major collector is typically a 3-lane road, and if you put a landscape island in the middle, it's still a 3-lane roadway, except in that area where those trees are at. For Penrose, that section that's developed and has that center landscape island, you have very limited, you don't have any driveways onto that roadway, so it's not impacting the access and capacity of that roadway very much.
And so we'll have complete turns on that roadway, since it's a minor collector, from the entrance to all the developments. It'll be a complete, you call it, 4-way turn? I'm so sorry, I forgot your terminology to mean you can make all of the directions.
Up at Syringa and Prairie, or?
Up at Penrose and the entrance to the development that's currently there, and then potentially the entrances to the developments, particularly on parcel 7 that we're talking about. So whatever road gets put there, because there's that median, are we going to be able to make left-hand turns out of both developments and right-hand turns?
So onto collector roadways, commercial and multifamily type developments are allowed to have access in conformance with the city's access control policy onto those roadways. We do not allow residential to have driveways onto major collector roadways. The reason for that is residential driveways, you tend to back out, which creates more of a safety issue. Multifamily or commercial projects, your driveways are situated in a way where your nose is going out into the road as you're entering the roadway, and you don't have traffic backing in, so you don't have the same safety concern.
I understand that, and that's not my question.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. So there will presumably, there's already a road that comes off of Penrose into this little development that's just south of it, right?
Yes.
And then there will also be a road that goes north off of Penrose that takes you into the proposed development. From both of those roads, will you be able to make a left-hand turn onto Penrose?
Yes.
Even given that there's not a consistent middle lane because of the landscaping that's been put in there?
Well, the intersections themselves will be configured so that they can handle those left turn movements.
Okay.
That doesn't mean that there's going to be left turn pockets at every location. That's more dependent upon if you have enough traffic on that roadway that's making the left turns that you put those in.
Okay.
And so, and Penrose is going to be operating at a, 25 mile per hour. The most I would probably anticipate it would be 30 miles per hour, but we're working with the developer that they're going to be including things like bulbs at some of the intersections, which help narrow the roadway as you go through the intersection to keep traffic at a slower speed. As you get into the area where this project is working, you have a park in the northeast corner of Syringa and Penrose, and you've got some potential commercial in that area. There's going to be on-street parking in that area. On-street parking, when it's utilized, tends to help slow traffic on roadways as well.
Okay.
Okay. So projects that we have going around in the area which will help mitigate any traffic impacts from this project and the impact fees that we collect as homes go in with this project would help pay for those projects. Those include widening of Prairie Avenue over at the intersection of Greens Ferry and Prairie. The traffic signal at that location will need to be rebuilt because that intersection currently is for a much smaller roadway. We do have identified in our transportation master plan and impact fee list a future signal at the intersection of Hope and Greens Ferry Road. And then we do identify a restriction on Prairie Avenue for a 3/4 turn restriction at Syringa Street with Prairie. And then we have done some analysis. We're updating our transportation master plan right now to more fully capture this. At the intersection of Idaho and Prairie, when that went in as a roundabout a couple years ago, that was a safety improvement. And the safety improvement that the Post Falls Highway District did was only for the minimum improvements that could be justified now to improve safety. They could not utilize the dollars to put in extra capacity to handle future needs. We anticipated that through 2035, which is our current transportation master plan, the road improvements that are in at Idaho and Prairie are sufficient to handle traffic needs. We anticipate, and I have to say anticipate because we don't have an updated transportation master plan that's been reviewed by the public, reviewed by you, and adopted. But my anticipation is that Idaho and Prairie is going to need to have either a larger roundabout or a traffic signal at 2035 or later. It makes sense when you take a look and say, well, we know that the roadway needs to be 5 lanes by 2035, so what are you going to put in at Idaho and Prairie? When it comes to handling that intersection, roundabouts and traffic signals are two tools in a toolbox as to how to handle traffic. When it comes time to actually putting in an improvement because traffic volumes are high enough at that location, we'll look at both options and we'll say which one is going to handle the traffic the best, which one's going to have the best impact on safety, and then we also have to work with the railroad and Post Falls Highway District. One of the concerns putting in a multi-lane roundabout at that location is how much closer can we actually physically get to the railroad without starting to cause other problems. Again, my gut is we will probably end up with a traffic signal, but it is something that I would still want to compare because in general, roundabouts tend to operate safer and more efficiently over most of the day than a traffic signal. But this may be a case that it won't turn out that way. Any questions on traffic?
Paulus. No. Thanks, Rob.
You're welcome.
So review criteria 4, looking at this site, we're looking at where the proposed subdivision, is there any soil or topographical conditions that would present hazards for this project? There was nothing that was identified as being a hazard to impede development of the site. Looking at the criteria 5, is the proposed subdivision, is it zoned for the proposed use? And in this one, we'd also be looking at, is it consistent with the development agreement? Staff looked at it, and we did find the proposal being consistent with the underlying zoning and consistent with the associated development agreement. Looking at criteria 6, this is about, with growth, does growth pay for growth, and is it paying for its fair share? So how this is done with subdivisions is they pay their impact fees. You can see here that it's collected at the time of building permits, and those fees go off to mitigate parks, public safety, multimodal pathways, and streets. We sent notices out, you can see here, to the group here, the agencies that were notified. We did get some comments, 7 and 8. They came with the city council notice. The other ones came with the P&Z notice. You can see here that the school district, they were neutral, but it was to identify that they do have an MOU with the applicant to allow potentially an opportunity to buy a school site on this, at this location. KCFR, Kootenai County Fire and Rescue, they typically identify their access controls at the time of prior to platting, making sure that they can have the right points of access and easements for public safety. YPL, one of the gas lines, commented they didn't have any issues with it impeding any of their right-of-way or their facilities. The police department, they remained neutral in the comment. DEQ cited that they had no environmental impact concerns of this site. The highway district did have comments. I believe Paulus has addressed most of their current, the first part of that. The engineering division stays in contact with the highway district on all the projects that they're both collaboratively working on. The last part, talking about the annexation, that's of the right-of-way. So back when this was originally annexed, it wasn't always standard practice to annex to the opposing side of the right-of-way. So this would be a separate annexation, and in talking with Mr. Paulus, there is the intent to create some legals that would allow for an annexation proposal at a later date to bring in that right-of-way to bring it up to the northern side. So that is on the to-do list in the future. There is the 6 criteria you see there. Those are what we would review subdivisions on for concurrency. Any questions for me?
Questions, Mr. Manley?
I just want to, and I may have read it incorrectly in like the narrative of this, but the 2-story multifamily restriction currently stands, correct? That was not removed at any point in any of the other hearings?
Nope, that was not removed. And it's the same height that, I think the reason why was they wanted to get that height similar to the single-family product. I think it's this 2-story restriction on it too for most single families. So.
Okay, sounds good,
Yep.
thank you.
Thanks.
That's not
You want more?
Yeah, sorry. Can you show on the bubble map where the MOU for the school district is? Because it looks like pretty much all of the land has been taken up.
I will point where I believe, and then the applicant can verify it. So kind of in this quadrant up here is some preliminary discussions. I believe it would be up in this zone, up in there. I believe that's kind of where they're preliminarily discussing for a tentative location. I would leave the applicant to actually add further clarifications on that, though.
Okay, thank you. I'm good now.
You done?
Thanks. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm
Just
done.
wanted to make sure, didn't want to rush. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Thanks, John.
All right, yep.
The applicant, and I didn't mention before, but anybody wishing to testify, including the applicant, we have a iPad up here with a timer. Just pay attention to it, and we'll, if you get close to the end of your time, we'll let you finish your statement, and that way we can move everything forward.
There you go.
Want to make sure you weren't leaving.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, my name is Kevin Schneidmiller. I reside at 6552 East Octavia Court here in Post Falls. I'm representing the applicant, Greenstone Kootenai 2, as well as the landowner Schneidmiller Brothers. Tonight, as Mr. Manley stated, we're requesting approval of us to subdivide approximately 238.52 acres, generally located north of the Fieldstone subdivision, south of Prairie Avenue, east of Idaho Street, and we do not go quite all the way to Greens Ferry. We're about 660 feet short of that. Generally, it is residential subdivision on all sides except for the north of Prairie Avenue, which is 5-acre tracts. A little bit of background. Work began on the North Place development in 2015 with a 40-acre subdivision located west of Idaho Street. At that time, it was requested to be developed under the R1 zoning, which this entire project was provided at the time of annexation in the early 2000s. Then in 2020, after completion of the first 40-acre subdivision, we came back and did a preliminary subdivision of 37 acres in the south east corner of the larger parcel which we're here discussing tonight. Originally, that entire parcel was about 265 acres. And again, that was done as R1 zoning. In 2021, we made a request to have the 238 acres rezoned to RM residential. And the reason for that is we were interested in being able to integrate different housing types as well as the potential for a small commercial project, all of which is allowed under the mixed-use zone. We would have done that with the first 2 subdivisions, but at that time there was no RM zone in the city of Post Falls. So shortly after adoption of that zone, we came forward. That request was approved in 2025, or 21, excuse me, by the City Council. Then in the spring of 2024, after a substantial time of working with staff, we came forward with a preliminary subdivision. We had our first hearing in June of this year in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, at which time they approved our development. That zoning has a file number of Annex 0007-2020. This is just kind of data that Mr. Manley mentioned a lot about. I want to highlight two items. At the time of zone change, we agreed to cap the number of units at 1,400 units. Even though that's not a requirement of the RM zone, it was brought forth and we agreed that that seemed like a reasonable request. Also in the RM zone, multifamilies is allowed to be 3 stories, and we were asked if we would restrict that to 2-story, and we also agreed to that. And the main reason we agreed to that is we felt from a scale standpoint and the location of this property, 2 stories made much more sense. As a company, we do 3-story multifamily, but we usually find it in more located areas that are centrally located to downtown areas and so forth. So again, we believed that the 2-story was appropriate for this site and agreed to that. Again, per the zone requirement, we're required to set aside 7% of open space. We're slightly above that with 8.75%. Currently, the preliminary subdivision shows a number of lots of 1,125 and a density of 4.72 lots per acre. Again, and I apologize, this exhibit's not quite as good as Mr. Manley's, but this is the map that was made a part of the annexation and development agreement, or excuse me, the zone change agreement in 2021, and it's a part of the record. We spent a lot of time. It'd be very easy just to show all the uses in each one of these bubbles. We don't believe that's the right approach, so we spent a lot of time determining where we felt were the appropriate locations for the various uses that we see as we build this project out over the next 15 years. So we felt bordering the Fieldstone subdivision that single-family attached and detached was the appropriate thing to do given the type of development that subdivision has had for a number of years. Same way to the at our eastern boundary, we looked at the same thing. We foresee, and you'll see that in our preliminary subdivision that I'll show in a minute, we believe that for the most part the appropriate place to provide attached single-family homes is adjacent to residential collector street. So Penrose and Syringa, and that's where you'll see the small commercial node that's proposed. One thing I want to point out is that north of Penrose, east of Idaho Street, and west of Syringa and south of Prairie, currently we're proposing to do a 55-plus age-restricted project in there. And it would be composed of single-family attached, single-family detached, and the multifamily that we're showing in the corner adjacent to Idaho and Penrose. That project would be amenitized with some type of a clubhouse facility, and it's also a maintenance-free. And as I said, it would be legally age-restricted per the Idaho code.
I'm sorry, Mr. Sneidmiller, can you use the mouse to denote which section you're talking about doing the 55 and over?
The 55 plus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So again, it's the two bubbles, again, east of Idaho, north of Penrose, west of Syringa, and south of Prairie, approximately 70 acres. So,
Kevin, if you move the mouse, I think you can show her.
yeah.
Because, I'm sorry, it sounds like you're talking about two
So
different
it's this
parcels.
area right here. Oop.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. It's this little triangle guy right here.
And the large piece, all of that.
Is all going to be 55 and over? So like
That's-
the majority of the development?
About a third of it, a little more than a third, so, yeah.
Okay.
Okay? So again, this is the preliminary subdivision we have proposed. Again, we have two multifamily sites. The RM zone allows up to 20% of the site for multifamily. We're far below that. So the question was asked, and Mr. Manley identified it correctly. The multifamily site adjacent to Prairie Avenue is where we have entered into a memorandum of understanding with the school district. They have 5 years to make a decision on whether they'd like to build a school on that site. If they don't, then, at that time possibly we'll relook at it with them. I think the issue was, and when we did the zone change, we approached the school district, and at that time they stated they had no interest in this site, and I think that was because of the close relationship of Prairie View Elementary, Greens Ferry Elementary, and this site. It stacked 3 elementary schools very closely to one another. Prior to the public hearing for the subdivision in June, the superintendent approached me and asked if we could have a discussion about that. And so we did, and that's how we entered into the memorandum of understanding. They still have a desire in discussing it with them to try to find a location a little greater distance from here. But we've worked with the school district for years on providing sites for them, and so we're very happy to enter into that memorandum of understanding, and we'll see where it goes from there. So, again, the multifamily site adjacent to Idaho Street, that would be part of the 55-plus community. It would be multifamily for that age demographic. So what we're finding, we've done these type of projects in other locations, and there is a certain amount of people that even in that demographic choose to no longer be homeowners and want the opportunity to rent. We have 2-story buildings that we're working on that would actually have an elevator in them to provide easier access. But so that location for multifamily, again, would be part of the age-restricted community. Again, as I mentioned in my opening comments, that one of our reasons for doing the and wanting to work in the RM zone is that the ability to provide a diversified housing and create some affordability. So you can see, again, the lots are much smaller on the south side of Penrose and the east side of Syringa, and that's the areas, again, adjacent to residential collectors where we are proposing to do higher density residential. That would consist of townhomes, attached, possibly some condominiums. We've done some small projects, and we don't believe in doing large type of projects. You'll see buildings that are 6 to 8 to 9 units, and then we'll mix in another product type and do that. And then, so we vary the product, and it very much fits into the scale. And I have some examples of that coming up. This simply shows our trail system that we're proposing. Again, a trail system along Penrose, Syringa, Idaho Street, and Prairie, then with some internal connections between blocks that would tie to that trail system. And this trail system really fits into the trail system in the surrounding areas. In Fieldstone, there are trails on Syringa as well as Idaho, so we're tying into that.
Mr. Schneidmiller, just point out the time. Couple
Yeah.
minutes left.
So this is just an example of some of the commercial would be very small neighborhood. You're looking at coffee shops, pizza, very localized things that the neighborhoods can take advantage of. Again, scale-wise, it's very small, fits into a residential neighborhood very well. This is just another shot of it. The other shot was looking down the street. Again, this was built on a corner, just like we're proposing on the corner of Syringa and Penrose. So you're talking 10, 12,000 square feet with users occupying 2,500 to 3,000. So very small scale. Buildings are one story, again, fit in very well. This is just some of our housing and product type. These are examples of what you would see in our 55-plus community as well as the normal neighborhood. These are rancher examples. Here's some of our town-owned product. Again, you've got, in this case, you've got five units attached, and then very often we would go to maybe a single story for 8 or 10 units and then back to a 2-story in those higher density areas. Just another example. Again, the scale fits in very well to the neighborhood, only 7, 8 feet taller than a 2-story residential home. So in conclusion, we believe the proposal is supported by the comprehensive plans, goals, and policies, conforms substantially to the zone change request proposed and approved in 2021, allows for a creation of economically diverse housing types and active residential neighborhoods, creates neighborhoods that fit in scale with one another and are aesthetically pleasing. We concur with the conditions that have been presented in the staff report. We respectfully request your denial of the appeal and approval of our request. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schneidmiller. Any questions from Mr. Schneidmiller?
I just want to confirm that that very bottom parcel that's like shaped, maybe Mr. Manley, you can be helpful in this, kind of like with straight line at the north and then around and is right on Penrose, that is part of your 55 and over
That's correct.
community.
Yes.
And potentially even where the clubhouse would be, if it's all the way
Excuse-
at the, potentially where even the clubhouse may be, if
Yeah,
it's all the way at the end
exactly.
of that road?
Yeah, the
Okay.
clubhouse would very likely go in that multifamily lot area.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so then if you sold that piece of property to the school, you would actually have no, what we think of as, or what we've seen around town as multifamily, because those parcels would be gone and you don't have multifamily planned anywhere else in the development?
Well, first, once the 55-plus neighborhood is established,
Right,
that's restricted by law at that point.
right.
And so the multifamily is part of that.
Sure.
Would have to stay within the 55-plus community.
But the MOU is where you have other multifamily.
Right.
And so if that was sold to the school district,
We
you
will
wouldn't have
not,
it.
we will not propose any other multifamily.
Gotcha, okay, thank you
Yeah.
so much, I appreciate that.
So,
Okay.
Yep.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Schneidmiller.
okay, thank you.
People wishing to testify? Thank you. In opposition, not wishing to testify, Claudia Collins. Make sure I had them all right here. In opposition, not wishing to testify, Logan Storm. In opposition, not wishing to testify, Rhonda Dudley. In opposition, not wishing to testify, Heather Holm. When I purchased my home, thank you. I was told there would be single-story homes behind me. I understand there will be apartments within this housing development. I just asked they be moved to a different location. Not wishing to testify in opposition, Daniel Kinsbrewski. There are enough houses and developments in the vicinity. Infrastructure is strained already, as indicated by low water pressure from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. in the summertime. Traffic and congestion is a concern with parks nearby. Safety also, I strongly object. Not wishing to testify in opposition is Donald Barker Jr. In opposition to apartments along Idaho Street, move apartments further east, 2-story apartments only, and I think that's been established already. In opposition, not wishing to speak, Christine Malm? Malm? I'm in opposition to new apartments being put in on Idaho Street, 2-story only. Please consider moving apartments into the center of the 270 acres. People who have already moved here are retired. We can't move. The way people can choose to live by, that way people can choose to live by apartments. Idaho Street is already like a freeway, 55 plus miles per hour, along with racing vehicles and passing on a 2-lane road. In opposition, not wishing to testify, Nick Vendetti. Have a letter, Mr. Harrington, I need to read the letter into the record, his notes.
Yeah, if it's, so,
He does not wish to testify, but he attached a letter.
so that's kind of under your
Okay.
purview, whether or not, so
I
technically
can-
written comments should come in.
I can
ahead
read
of
it if
time.
that's right. Or did you want to speak? Okay, hang on just a minute.
We provide for brief written testimony.
Okay.
If it's a letter, it's up to the chair.
Gotcha. In opposition, not wishing to speak, Ashley Horst. I was told when I bought that the homes behind my home were going to be 55-plus single-story homes, not apartments. I may not have purchased if I knew they were going to be apartments in my backyard. Okay. Wishing Got it. Okay, wishing to testify in opposition is Susan Vendetti, so we'll let you come forward now. And when you come up, please name for the record. And again, just keep your eye on the timer.
Thank you. My name is Susan Vendetti, and I want to thank you for allowing me to speak. My husband and I moved here within the community specifically because we wanted a safe, family-centered environment. We desired streets where children and family could walk and ride bikes safely, as well as understanding our community would remain low-density, single-family residences. I urge you to deny the construction of multifamily residences. This would invariably cause a huge influx of congestion, change the character and charm of our neighborhood, with the chance of even increased crime. If you allow senior apartment homes within our development, I urge you to have the senior single-family rental cottages placed along the street so that the main attraction would maintain the main attraction of the neighborhood. The attractive white picket fencing is welcoming to all, just like they did. I'm speaking about like how they do with the cottages along the park within our development. So just in the same kind of theme. I also urge you to hold the developer to his word to that, because he said that at the meetings that there would be only senior residential residences within that development. And unfortunately, he hasn't kept all his word, because he said that there would be only a single family in that area before. So I urge you to keep that at his word, keep him as his word. And also, the busy times of the day, left turns onto Idaho from Penrose is already an issue. I know we have neighbors that are across the street on Penrose, and they complain all the time. It's very difficult. So this is going to cause increased difficulty, plus much added difficulty on Penrose if you're going to be having people coming from the new development onto Penrose. So you're going to have congestion going both ways, and that's going to be an issue. We have many young families with children who will be driving also within the next 3 to 5 years. So you've got increased drivers that way, because right now there's a lot of young families. If multifamily residences are allowed, Idaho and Penrose would need a traffic light to be added. This would be accomplished by, of course, by the developer, since the developer is benefiting in all ways for this development. Any proposals of any roundabout would not be an option, because at this time, young children and families walk around the neighborhood and they walk across prairies, so right across Idaho. And as we all know, as we've seen, children have been hit in the trying to cross on a roundabout. So roundabouts increase the likelihood that a pedestrian or bicyclist will be hit, as the attention of the driver is on the cars in the circle and they're rushing to enter. The bicyclists and the walkers are left in a dangerous position. Numbers used in traffic and road construction must be challenged as well. Use of counters and actual amount of cars traveling on Idaho is much more beneficial. Thank you for your assistance, and I remind you that we voted for you, trusting that you would be caring and conservative and concerned about our community, and we hope that you follow through with this, with our requests. And thank you for this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Wishing to testify in opposition, Julie Hensley.
I am Julie Hensley, 1360 East Warm Springs Avenue in Post Falls. The North Place East proposed development lacks the necessary requirement to be approved. The review criteria requires that the proposed streets are consistent with the transportation elements of the comprehensive plan. Syringa Street is classified as a minor collector road. Minor collector roads are only supposed to support 1,500 to 5,000 vehicles a day. In current plans, Syringa is the only street that gives access to Prairie Avenue. The city engineer states that there are currently 2,000 vehicles on average a day just between Poline and Bogey alone. How is Syringa going to stand under 5,000 vehicles per day with the proposed development? There needs to at least be an impact study done. Because of the number of proposed lots, the increased traffic for commercial use, and the number of higher density homes puts more vehicles on Syringa than the comprehensive plan has designated for this road. Note that Syringa is the only road from Mullen to Prairie Avenue with such a low traffic classification. During the planning and zoning hearing, a huge concern is the increased traffic on Idaho Street and Prairie Roundabout from this community. A gentleman from the railroad system stated they are expected to double the amount of trains next to that intersection. This is going to cause even more of a backup to this already unsafe intersection. The amount of people I have watched run the stop sign before and after the roundabout, not realizing they just passed an unguarded train track, is incredible. Someone is going to get killed. There is a reason why police are often sitting there. There is a known problem already. Having to fix this intersection and the cost the citizens will have to pay for a new school makes it so that the developer hasn't made adequate plans to ensure the community will bear no more than its fair share of cost. Schools will highly be impacted by this development and cause either overly crowded schools or substantially raise taxpayers' taxes by the money needed to be collected to build the new schools. I called the City of Post Falls School District, and per their assistant superintendent, the schools are at 100% capacity currently, and yet we're still building thousands of homes in our community. Unfortunately, current state legislation doesn't allow for us to collect impact fees for our schools, so guess who will pay for this? The price. The kids are going to end up paying for this. They'll be the first ones because of overcrowding of schools, and then the taxpayers will pay by having to buy the land and pay for schools to be built. Building a school requires a bond to be passed. It has become difficult to even have a levy passed that only takes the majority vote. And yet we expect a bond to be passed that takes 2/3 vote yes? So yes, our kids will pay the price first. Hopefully not as much as those who have taught and condemned schools in other cities in Idaho. The school board came and spoke at the planning and zoning meeting, stating they wish they had been notified of the zone change because they are highly concerned on the impact this will have on our schools. The superintendent was notified and warned about this years ago, but never disclosed this to the board. The citizens will be paying for this development. Those of us that back up to this development had our right-of-way taken away by this council. Schneidmiller stated that alleyways increase crime, that the land should be given back to him. Now look at the new development and how many back alleyways there are. The police department is already running thin. Recently in the Coeur d'Alene Press, one of our city police officers stated that it's been kind of a downhill slide in the past few years. 6 months ago, we had fewer employees than when I was hired in 2018. With how much the city is growing, it was a shrinking department. Our calls for service were increasing, but we have fewer people to handle them. What strain is another 1,400 homes going to cause for this community? Mayor, you're the only one left sitting on this council that voted yes for this higher density. The citizens are letting you know what they don't want in their town. I want everyone to remember those fluffy cloud circles once depicted on that plan are now microscopic lots. The high-density homes along Idaho Street and Prairie aren't even depicted on this plot map yet. I hope the city learns from this, because those fluffy clouds from afar can end up becoming the storm that destroys the city you love.
Thank you. We do have one more that does not wish to speak in opposition. Keith Plass, not providing for railroad traffic increasing. Prairie Road will not be very drivable above 50% capacity. 55 plus zoning needs more spacing in plots to allow for safer medical response. People moved in this area to avoid multifamily rentals. Idaho already experienced significant congestion at pole line during rush hour. Added cost of additional school would be borne by existing communities. Wishing to speak in opposition, Kyle Storm.
Good evening, Council, Mayor. Let me pull my notes up here. My name is Kyle Storm of 979 East Percival Avenue. I live in the North Place East development, in that little, kind of semicircle shape in the southwest corner of the new lot that is being platted. I just have a couple of concerns. Number one, 55 plus apartment buildings. That doesn't really resonate with me. The developer says that he has done this type of project before, and I don't doubt that. My concern is that at this point, it's only a suggestion by the developer. It's not in the development agreement with the city. If those apartments are built and not able to be rented to 55 plus people that don't want them, I'm concerned what could happen at that point, as they could potentially be rented out to other tenants that are not 55 plus. I don't really see the difference between building 2-story 55 plus apartments with elevators, which are not cheap, rather than just building cottages like we have already in the development that are attractive. They're on narrow lots, they're smaller sized homes, and they're already maintenance free. The HOA fees that they pay go toward mowing the lawns, clearing the snow, doing things like that. Mostly, I don't like the fact that the apartments are going to be on that corner of Idaho and Penrose. It doesn't really fit with the area. You've got one corner is a very large park that borders on the Prairie Falls Golf Course. The other two corners are both R1, low density residential. To stick some, apartment buildings, at our last HOA meeting, the developer said they could be up to 20 attached units. Even though they're no more than 2 stories, doesn't sound like there's a limit on how many you can attach together. Also, being 7 to 8 feet taller than a 2-story home, that's pretty tall. That's like, you're kind of getting up there toward having a 3rd story at that point. Biggest concern would be the traffic. We're talking up to 1,400 units. Okay, so you have 2 cars per vehicle. That's 2,800 vehicles. I think we all know a lot of people have more than that. We do. Okay, say you have 2,800 vehicles as a result of this development, additional. And Prairie Avenue, according to the city engineer, is at 57% on Prairie Avenue. Okay, so let's say only 25% of these new vehicles, of these 2,800 vehicles, make 2 trips per day on Prairie Avenue. Okay, I think that's pretty reasonable. 1/4 of the people in the development drive out to work and back on Prairie Avenue at some point, or out to go shopping or whatever. Okay? Say they do that in a 14-hour period between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. You're adding 5 cars every 3 minutes on Prairie Avenue. And that's assuming they would be evenly distributed, not during rush hours. Now add the potential that you might be putting a school on Prairie, which would require a reduction in the speed limit during certain times of the day, down to 20 miles an hour, potentially, which is what we see in other areas.
Mr. Storm?
Yes.
Time's up. Could you wrap it up for me?
Oh, I sure can. Sorry about that. I think that's going to cause a major traffic problem, especially with the roundabout. I have several pictures where a train has just come through, and there's 58 cars stuck in that roundabout. Okay? Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Next up, Holly Hatcher.
Hi, I'm Holly Hatcher. I live at 3560 North Shelburne Loop, which is the North Place West. You sit there because we, the citizens and residents of Post Falls, put you there. The seat you hold should be a selfless one because you are not there to put into action your own desires or plans. We put you there to be our voice, to listen to us, and to implement what we want for our town. You are not there to fulfill your own desires or vision, to have the pockets of individuals or investors, or for personal gain. But it seems to be exactly what happens. It is appalling that a local citizen had to pay a fee to have this appeal in this meeting. And it's a low, dirty attempt from someone to keep residents from coming tonight by scheduling on Election Day. The residents of Post Falls continue to voice that the growth being allowed is at a pace and a density that does not fit the desires of those who live here. Builders and politicians say that we need to provide options for housing for anyone who wants to come in different price ranges and styles, but that's not true. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not aware of any law, federal or state, that says that just because people want to live in a certain place, that it is our obligation and responsibility as the community to build them a place to come and live in. If they can't afford the places that are being built, well, then they all need. Build a nauseating amount of ugly, high-density housing that will put a strain on the already limited sources and accommodate them. We're not against growth or consider it evil, but there is a difference between unrestrained and irresponsible growth that is being allowed, and the growth that is set at a slow, controlled rate that allows for infrastructure and resources to be evaluated and maintain the natural beauty and environment that makes Post Falls Post Falls. I'm aware that there are many of us that are feeling betrayed and angry in this North Place and the surrounding neighborhoods that
Back to order. And folks, just so you know, it's the technical difficulties is dealing with the internet. So it's back up right now, but if it goes down again, we may have to take another quick break. So just kind of make you aware of it. Usually I don't do this because we've called for people to testify, and we're almost through it, and we get more forms coming in, but I'm going to go ahead and read these two. In opposition, not wishing to speak, is Jennifer Knutson and Tiffany Goodwin. Now wishing to speak in opposition, Catherine Zimmerman.
Hi, thank you for hearing us tonight. Catherine Zimmerman, 932 Percival. So there were many of us, well, first of all, I want to say I'm one of those that did not receive a notice of coming here tonight. And the yellow sign that went out on Idaho and Penrose just went up the other day. We just saw those about this hearing. So there was many of us at the planning and zoning meeting in June to voice our concerns. At that time, the commission gave consideration to add a restriction on parcel 7 for the residential mix. That concerned appeal is not just, so it's not just for parcel 7, it's the whole thing, all the apartments, townhomes. So subsequently, the Planning and Zoning Commission rescinded that restriction, commenting that it's a 2-story apartment townhome. It's not going to be this monstrous thing, right? Well, first of all, they don't live in our neighborhood, so they don't know what that would be, right? And I'm insulted with that flippant remark by the Planning Commission. Now, when my daughter and her family first were looking for a home in 2021, they settled on Greenstone, and Ian Swanston of Caldwell Banker Schneidmiller provided a realtor for her to use. That realtor indicated that the land across from the lot would be 55 and over single-story, single-family homes. No mention that there would be apartments or townhomes at this 2-story level. My next daughter and her family decided to also move in the neighborhood and use that same realtor, again, no mention if those apartments or townhomes. And in 2022, I also used that same realtor, again, no mention of the apartments or townhomes. And prior to the zoning and planning meeting, I asked the realtor what was going there, and she said that she would check. I'm still waiting to hear back from her. So as Mr. Schneidmiller indicated, 2021, they received approval for that multifamily, and it was not disclosed to us when we all were purchasing after that meeting. During the planning and zoning meeting, Kevin indicated that he can't control what realtors tell their clients. However, when the realtor represents the builder and is related to the developer, holding pertinent information is misleading and unethical. If we had known that residential mixed zoning was there, either the 2-story apartments or townhomes that were going in the corner of Idaho and Penrose, we would not have moved into the North Place area. The impression is that a sale or three was more important than being honest, because myself and my 2 daughters and their families, that realtor got those commissions. So I'm sure, changing from single-family story to 2-story townhomes and apartment changes the density of the area. And as a senior, I can tell you, I would not want to be in an apartment, especially after being in the snow, climbing stairs. And maybe they're going to have elevators, but not something I would be interested in. It's already difficult at certain times of the day to get onto Idaho from Penrose because of the traffic on Idaho, and adding more density to the area will make matters worse. And I have no disrespect to the traffic discussions here tonight, but it seems like, it's just kind of flippant remarks, like they haven't really done an important study. So the studies were brought up to the Planning and Zoning Committee related to water, sewer, trash, traffic, and the police. A roundabout at Prairie in Idaho just went in and not adequate with a stop sign for the railroad crossing. The project description indicated that the intent of the constraint of the subdivision generally consists of a primary plat. What
Ms.
does that
Zimmerman?
mean? Yeah.
Can you finish up, please?
Yes. So We all know that the build-out of that 230 acres will happen. However, I'm respectfully asking you to consider moving the senior two-story townhomes or apartments to another area besides at the corner of Idaho and Penrose. It not only will affect the traffic, but will take away from the beauty and the otherwise quiet neighborhood that we all moved into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And last up is Brett Collins.
Hello, good evening, City Council. My name is Brett Collins. I reside at 1033 East Percival. My back road is Penrose, which is the contentious area that we're all talking about here, and it's the reason why I'm up here. I vehemently oppose the project or the plan of adding multi-unit family homes behind in this lot. It's rather disingenuous of the builder and our real estate agents at the time in 2021, in December 2021, when we were looking for homes with Greenstone. The agents told us three things about the property in the field. The sell points were single-story, 55-plus housing, a beautiful park, and a nice small commercial development coffee shop, which is totally fine. I heard that theme repeated several times from December 2021, January 2022, and February 2022. So there conveniently was left out about the economically diverse housing wasn't mentioned, the multifamily apartments was left out, and all this expansion. So it's something that we were never told about. We were misled. And so I'm here to speak in opposition. I vehemently oppose it. And I just want to thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Mr. Schreiber, you care to rebut?
I don't have any rebuttal at this time. I'd be happy to answer any clarifications or anything you might have.
Mr. Stiegler, you had a question, I believe, right?
Yeah, and Field, maybe you can help me with this. Is there a way that you're willing to put into some documentation that we can be assured that this area off of Penrose and Idaho will be 55 and older restricted? Is that something that you guys are prepared to do?
Well, that's a little bit, because we have to make sure we can go through the legal process to get it adopted, and there is a process to do that. And we're going to begin into that after the first of the year. But it's a little hard. If you're asking if I'm willing to put a condition on it, no, not at this time, because we don't know. I'm highly confident we'll be successful, but we don't know that for sure. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that answers my question then. Thank you.
Yeah. Other?
Yeah, and do you recall what year the land was initially annexed? I think you had that on your first slide.
Excuse me?
Do you know what year the property was annexed into the city?
2004, I believe,
Okay.
2003, 4, 5, somewhere in there. Yeah, that's going back a ways. So
Yeah.
yeah. So,
All right, thank
but
you.
it's been annexed for a number of years. So, yeah.
Any questions?
So just to tag on, just for conditions, they would need to be applied as they relate to the specific criteria in the subdivision. So in a subdivision, you would apply conditions in order for them to meet the criteria. So for example, the criteria in there about certain traffic control, no left turns on these type of things, that's in order to meet the specific condition or the specific criteria of the subdivision, just to clarify.
Okay.
You okay?
I've got a couple questions for staff.
Go ahead. Can we go with staff now? Thank you, Mr. Schneimiller. Public hearing's still open. Can we ask questions of staff?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Randy.
Can we get clarification on what the procedure is for providing notice for public hearings? I know there's something about a radius around the target parcel that we mail to.
Yeah, we take the legal description as provided by the applicant. We verify with our GIS team that does represent the legal area. And then we do also, that's a 300-foot radius. So everybody within 300-foot radius is supposed to get a mailing. It is verified through a title report from a title company. The applicant pays for that, they deliver that, we look at it, and then we send it out per that 300-foot radius.
Okay, and that's 300 feet from any portion of the parcel in question, right?
Correct.
Okay. And there was a mention of signs placed around?
Excuse me, no comments, please.
What's that?
There's a comment about signs placed around too. Do we place signs out there? Or
Yeah, we do. We
is
get an
that placed by
affidavit
the
of
applicant?
posting. So the date it goes out, and it's in our record, we get an affidavit of posting of the date that it goes out, and it gets signed.
Okay.
And that gets done within, I think, 10 or 11 days prior to the public hearing. Oftentimes, we go before that, though.
Now, I want to make sure I understand the timeline on this, because
Mm-hmm.
it took me a little while digging through the agenda packet tonight to kind of piece this together. So the land is annexed into the city in the early 2000s, and it's assigned a zone, R1 it looks like. And then on October 5th, 2021, it's rezoned from R1 to RM for the remaining parcel. And that's when the development agreement is put in place. With
Correct.
the restrictions about only 2 stories for multifamily, and so that's put in place. And then a couple of years go by, and then it was June 11th of this year, it first goes to planning and zoning for subdivision. And they grant the request, but initially say that they're going to place a restriction on multifamily.
Just on parcel 7.
On parcel 7, yes. And then on July 24th of this year, our city attorney writes a memo that says, we had a contract with the applicant, we can't actually add additional restrictions because that was determined, it's part of the development agreement, right? The development agreement didn't stipulate anything, and so we can't go in and just arbitrarily add conditions to it because we have a binding contract, right? Then on August 13th, Planning and Zoning approves a recent decision without that condition. They dropped the condition and then approved it. And then an appeal was filed after that by the residents to bring it back to us, who want that condition to be applied to it. Is my understanding correct on the timeline?
Sounds correct. I do think it's, as a de novo, I don't know what the parameters are in a new hearing. I think Phil could comment on that.
Yeah, so the appeal basically just restarts the public hearing process before this body. So it's a brand new hearing. The presentation is redone, and if new evidence can come in, new public comment, it's just a brand new hearing on the subdivision itself. So it's an appeal of that final decision of the Planning and Zoning Commission without that condition.
And in the development agreement, this was the copy of the slide you had up with the bubbles showing the different zones. And that area right above Penrose was marked as multifamily in the development agreement in October 2021, right? That was
Correct.
already part of the plan.
That's the map that was in that development agreement.
So there was, before that, there was no condition that was going to restrict that, and there was no real change in plans about where the multifamily was located. This was always the plan since 2021, right?
From what I understand, that'd be correct.
Okay. All right, thank you for the timeline clarifications. And then I would like to have our Mr. Paulus address the traffic on Syringa, since that was brought up.
Traffic on Syringa from the standpoint as to how much is going to be heading down.
Yeah, there were concerns that the traffic would put us
Okay.
over what's
So
projected.
going back, the current volume is on Syringa is 2,000 vehicle trips per day. Our modeling, based upon the land use on this area of about 5 units per acre, they're a little bit higher than 5 units per acre, shows that with the Penrose connections and Syringa's connection to Prairie Avenue and Killdeer's connection to Greens Ferry as well, that Syringa's volume is not anticipated to get above 3,000 vehicle trips per day. Being a minor collector roadway, we view that a minor collector roadway operates the way we intend it to, between 1,500 trips per day up to 4,000 trips per day. So that is, 3,000 is within the 4,000 that's allowed. Now, if we looked at the actual capacity of that roadway, it's going to show up as less than 20% of capacity, because a 3-lane roadway can have a volume capacity of up to 12,000, but we don't want to see that on Syringa. That's why we're having them put in bulb outs at the intersection of Penrose and Syringa. And so we're trying to incorporate design elements to try to keep the traffic volumes lower and slower in their subdivision. The piece that's down in Fieldstone, that's already been built out as a 3-lane road with bicycle lanes and is a much wider roadway than what is being built in this subdivision.
Okay, so even after this, and this is going to take a couple decades to build out, but even after this, we're going to be below the 75% usage threshold where we start to see service degradation?
Yes.
So it's 75% of 4,000 or 75% of 12,000?
If you look at the true road capacity, you're 75% of 12,000 is where you would really start to see problems. But that's contrary to how we want to see that road work with that development area. We want it to be at 4,000 or less vehicle trips per day. We're anticipating it to be at 3,000 or less, so that's why we're comfortable with it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's everything for me.
Just some further clarification for every, so Field, what's at play here is this an appeal to the subdivision, so the property lines within the greater property, correct?
So it's an appeal of the decision of the planning commission. And so it's just the city council considering the subdivision application on its
All right,
merits.
so it's not an appeal of the annexation or of the zoning designation or of the development agreement?
Nope.
It's purely the subdivision is what the appeal is?
It's just a de novo hearing on the subdivision before city council.
So with that said then, the plot or the site map, like the plotting that I see in our agenda packet, is different than one of the ones that's been shown as the subdivision.
So the subdivision that actually has the lots on it is part of the subdivision application. So
Isn't that what we're talking about?
yes.
Okay, so the one that I'm looking at, that was part
the
of our
bubble map?
packet, no,
Oh.
the one with all of the lots drawn on it
Mhm.
is actually different than the one that's been shown in the slides. And so I just want to make sure that we're looking at the right one, if we're truly looking at the subdivision, if this is truly a subdivision hearing.
Do you have a page number on that, Samantha?
Yeah. Oh, well, I'm not super techie. 75, I think, is what I'm looking at.
See if John can load it up for you.
And specifically, the lot that looks different, at least from my recollection of looking at that, is Lot 7.
I'm
And
sorry,
you
you said-
mean
you said 75, but there's not that many slides, so let him find it.
Oh,
Holler-
yeah, I'm
holler.
sorry. It's page 75. Okay, so that one does look similar. Maybe it was what Mr. Schneidmiller showed, where it was more circular at the end, Lot 7, but I would imagine yours and mine are the same. But this is the official one, no matter what else I saw. This is the one that we are officially talking about.
Yeah, this is the map that was submitted with the applicant package. I
Okay.
would note that as we approve this as a preliminary subdivision plan, there is a potentiality that some of the arcs and angles and shapes of this ultimately can get approved and platted through what's considered a minor amendment, because they didn't materially change the actual proposal. If there was any sort of like increase or like a change in a road that caused like a major would be considered a major change, then that would come back for a whole new hearing, because we say, hey, that's a major change. It's significantly different than what you're seeing and what was proposed. Or if there was an increase on lot counts, so there's 1125 lots. If there's an increase in lot counts, once again, we'd be back here reviewing this. But some of the roads, whether it's a little more square or a little awkward in shape, some of those things can be modified.
Gotcha. Okay, sorry, it just struck me as being different, so I wanted to make sure I was looking at the correct picture.
Any questions?
I have a question, and maybe I'm kicking a dead horse here, but the purpose of this public hearing is to review the entire plat application or to review the plat application as restricted by the P&Z?
No, your job here tonight is to consider the subdivision application as if it had come to you.
Regardless of the reason for the appeal.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we're looking at these 6 review criteria for the subdivision, knowing in place that, you know, the history that Randy had brought up about the zoning in place, the development agreement, and looking at these 6 conditions or review criteria against the proposal, and are they consistent with them?
Right. Okay.
While you're there, so the notice of public hearing, are those letters sent out certified mail? Can we verify that they were received or delivered?
They are not certified. They're mailed based off of the title report that was done at the time that the title report was done, which is in a relatively near proximity to that. I mean, if an applicant sat for a long time, like, you know, a significant, we'd probably go to legal counsel and say, hey, is this too far away? Should we get a new title report? But as long as it's still in an acceptable, reasonable time of the public hearing, then we go ahead and use those addresses.
We also publish it on the website and publish it in the paper.
Right. I just, you can't prove a negative, so if somebody says they didn't get notice, then unless it was sent certified mail, we can't prove that. So I don't, that's a side topic that we probably should discuss at a workshop or something, but I was hoping there might be some more evidence that, hey, these actually went, you know. But there's also other publication methods, so.
Any further questions of staff?
I also wanted to address one other comment just on the comment about there not being a law that we have to go through this process, and there is. The state mandates that we go through a comprehensive planning process. The purpose of the Local Land Use Planning Act is to protect private property rights and encourage urban and urban type development within city limits. So there is a state mandate that we do this process. So just wanted to touch on that.
So we can either approve the subdivision as presented. If we deny it, what does that mean and what happens next?
So a denial would basically, we would come back with a written decision of that denial based on whatever comes out of deliberations. And then any party would have the potential to, I believe they would have to request reconsideration by the city council first, and then following that reconsideration period is when they can seek judicial review. And because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, they can go to the court to present their claim.
Okay. And that would,
We would be looking to see if a failure of meeting one of these criteria, right? To deny it, we'd have to see how the proposal was inconsistent with one of these review criteria.
Yeah, so I'd have to go back and review our code on the follow-up appeal, but that reconsideration process, we would do an analysis of where those might lie, if that answers your question.
I'm just saying if there was a denial, we would be saying, like, one of the conditions, condition 5, we would cite how it failed to meet.
Yeah, so I think I see what you're getting at. So any denial would have to be based on
Like
some sort of
always.
express condition, just like the approval.
so there's no wiggle room. I don't want to say wiggle room, but there's no ability for us to consider that a process wasn't followed, if that is one of the main points that was brought out of public comment. So
I would suggest that if you think there is pertinent evidence in the record, that you can certainly voice those concerns during deliberation.
okay, thanks.
We done with questions? Good to close the public hearing? I'll reopen if I need to.
Yeah.
Close the public hearing. So we need to go through the 6 criteria, correct?
Yes.
Let's start with that.
So the first criteria is whether or not there's been a definite provision has been made for a water supply system that is adequate in terms of quantity, quality, and the type of subdivision proposed. So basically whether or not there is water.
Yeah, that's been established.
It's been established.
Going to be serviced by
Two purveyors?
Two purveyors.
Post Falls on one side and
Ross
Green Acres on
Point?
the other.
Yeah, Ross Point.
Ross Point.
Yeah,
Ross
yeah.
Point.
All right. The second criteria is whether adequate provisions have been made for a public sewage system and that the existing municipal sewer system can accommodate the proposed flows.
After $60 million we've just spent, I would hope so. Yes.
Staff said it can.
Right. The third criteria is whether or not the proposed streets are consistent with the transportation element of the comprehensive plan.
So yes, Mr. Paulus has indicated that they are. Everything is within capacity projections for the streets.
I appreciate Mr. Paulus's expertise on this. I would say that I perhaps am not quite convinced, especially on Penrose, as it reminds me very much of, the street that runs in front of Super One that is also 2 lanes in both directions. And Polson, thank you. That has the landscape in between that is often difficult to make left-hand turns in either direction coming out of those office buildings that are there. So I'm not saying that I have, that I know traffic studies or can do my own, but my gut is perhaps not convinced by number 3 just yet.
For me, I think, of course, it's hard for me to comment because I'm not an engineer, but the traffic projections and models are based on established models that are used widely throughout the industry and the discipline. So I believe that the streets are consistent with the transportation element.
Nathan?
I'm good.
Good.
All areas of the proposed subdivision which may involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified, and that the proposed uses of these areas are compatible with such conditions.
There were no hazards identified.
Agreed.
And the area proposed for subdivision is zoned for the proposed use, and the use conforms to the other requirements found in this code.
That is correct. Everything that's being proposed is allowable within the designated zone and the development agreement.
The development agreement imposed the 2-story limitation on multifamily and the 1,400 unit cap. Those are the only conditions put on it, and the applicant has met both of those.
Yes.
And finally, 6. The developer has made adequate plans to ensure that the community will bear no more than its fair share of costs to provide services by paying fees, furnishing land, or providing other mitigation measures or off-site impacts to streets, parks, and other public facilities within the community. It is the expectation that in most cases, off-site mitigation will be dealt with through the obligation to pay development impact fees.
I would argue that this is true, especially with the MOU that has since been signed with the school district for provision of a school site. Also, all of the internal infrastructure is being provided by the developer. Impact fees will be used to provide part of the widening of Prairie Avenue, the expansion of traffic controls at the major intersections, et cetera.
The MOU with the school district would seem to show that the developer has gone beyond his minimum duties and looking to mitigate impact.
I mean, there is the comment about the police force that I don't think should be totally ignored, as we know that that's been a challenge for our community over the last couple of years, and to have that so publicly spoken in something like the CDA press. We know that impact fees don't totally provide for everything that we need for a growing community. So yes, but as far as the way that this is worded, in a way that's very difficult to say no, but I do think that it's worth pointing out that this is a very large site that we're plotting out, and that we don't really know what 10 or 15 years will look like, and if the impact fees that we have planned will actually be enough to provide for these services, specifically with a police department that we are already working very hard to bring up to put back up to full capacity.
Well, I guess my comment on that is, I don't disagree. Impact fees 10 or 15 years from now. And I would say that a development that neighbors my property, I think was approved in '98. And it's another greenstone project, and they're still building it. So it does take 20 years, 25 years. But the impact fees we continually update. So you're right, it may not cover it all, but we do have the ability to, as we review the impact fees on our periodic basis, to increase accordingly. So
Fair enough.
may not be 100%, but we do have that opportunity.
And as allowed by law, because there is a cap we can,
Yeah.
that we can charge.
Before we get into voting, I want to say to everybody here for public comment, thank you for showing up and voicing your concerns, and we hear you. We are also operating in a very narrow context here. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, which means we're acting kind of in the role as a judge, and we're dealing with property rights. We can't make arbitrary decisions based on preferences. Right now, we're making decisions based on a set of established criteria that are lined up to make sure that we deal with everybody's property rights in a fair way. And in particular, the decision is made at the time of zoning and development agreement. So a lot of this comment would have, perhaps more action could have been taken based on it at the October 5th, 2021 hearing, or even in the early 2000s when this was first annexed and the plan to build all of this out was settled. Once that development agreement is in place, we can't impose arbitrary restrictions on it. It's already there. As our city attorney has pointed out, if we start imposing arbitrary restrictions, then the city can be sued for a violation of private property rights. And this is under Idaho Code Title 67, Chapter 80. It constitutes a regulatory taking of private property rights. So once that development agreement is in place, we're looking at these 6 criteria. It's a very technical analysis. Does it fit with this? And it's kind of a yes or no thing. When the development agreement is first going in, that's when there's a lot more flexibility to say, kind of, this is how we want it to go. And so I just want everyone to know that I understand, and I kind of, I hear you, and I kind of feel the pain of, especially if you feel like you were lied to, right? Because realtors will say things sometimes to get you to buy a house. And the best I can say for that is, if your realtor lied to you, you can pursue legal action against the realtor for misrepresentation, but that's a totally separate issue than what we're dealing with here, which are private property rights. And so I hope if you were lied to, if there's something else going on, I don't know what's happened at the HOA meetings or what's been said, but there are potentially other avenues for you to pursue legal remedy if there is anything that rises to the level of fraud or misrepresentation. And really today is a very technical kind of analysis, and so I hope everybody understands how those are kind of separate, and I really want everyone to bring this kind of input to the next time we update our comprehensive plan, which is going to be the next 2 years. We're doing data analysis for that right now, getting stuff from contractors who are coming in and giving us analysis of the areas we have data to work with. And then sometime in the next 2 years, when we do the comprehensive plan update, we do the future land use map, that's really when a lot of the decisions are made for how things are going to look in 20 years and in 50 years. And so I hope you bring a lot of the kind of public comment to that as well.
Anybody else?
I can kind of add to that in that, so one correction is the public hearing for the zone change wasn't in October 5th. That was the passage of the resolution that resulted from the public hearing. Public hearing itself was in July or August, I believe, of 2021. And, I know there's been comments that people say that we don't listen to public comment. Well, there was plenty of public comment given during that public hearing, and I voted against the zone change at that public hearing. That having been said, that ship has now sailed. So that I was on the losing end of that vote. The zone change passed, the development agreement passed, and so now I'm left in the position of having to uphold what was passed by that council and to look at the subdivision only. So that's what we're here to adjudicate on. Again, to echo what Randy said, this is not the first time. I've been doing this for 13 years now. It's far from the first time. I have heard from folks in the audience that a realtor said something that was not exactly true. And it boils my blood every time, assuming that assuming that that happened. So I would encourage you to seek remedy for those things, because some of you paid extra money for view lots, being told that there wasn't going to be anything more than a single-family home. If that's a misrepresentation that I wouldn't give up on. Unfortunately, we're not the court for that. So I would encourage you to pursue those things. There's been some, I don't know if confusion is the right word, but with the P&Z adding conditions on the multifamily, P&Z is not an elected body. Therefore, they don't have the authority to add such conditions. That has to be the council. But like I said before, that ship had already sailed back in 2021 when the zone change and development agreement came into effect. So that rightly had to be corrected with their recent decision. Yeah, so it's a tough spot. I hear you. I voted against it in 2021. Not much I can do about it now in terms of whether the development actually happens. Changing development agreement, that's all. That ship has sailed.
Yeah, I would like to just kind of go over the timeline of that as well. I remember it very clearly, the city council meeting when this came across. I was at the time considering running for this seat, and that was the last straw for me. And I think what this all boils back down to is that decision to change the zoning from R1 to residential mix. You know, part of the criteria that we're looking at tonight, and I agree with Randy, and I think you've stated it very well, it's very narrow in scope. But part of the criteria that I want to highlight is number 6. When we're talking about the fair share of costs, that the community will bear no more than its fair share of costs. I understand what that verbiage means as far as specific dollar amounts or damages that might be incurred by the community. But I'd also like to highlight, again, going back to that meeting in 21, how do you estimate the fair share of cost of broken trust of a community that was built next to a big open field and were assured that their neighbors would have the same type of housing that they are currently buying? That's the kind of thing that I don't know how to put a number on that, how to qualify that in any way, but I think it's pertinent to our conversation today. And I would also like to echo what Randy said about, you know, I really appreciate every one of you who came down to this meeting tonight. It's unfortunate that the decision about the change in zoning has been made, and we are in such a narrow spot to make a decision on this. But I would encourage you very much to be involved in the preliminary hearings, the annexations, whether it's in your backyard or not, whether it's on the far side of town that you may not feel it affects you. Being engaged in the process at that early stage has such a greater effect on the feel of our community than, unfortunately, in a meeting like tonight. I do get pretty fired up about this particular development because it was one of those main driving forces as to why I ran for city council, because I think our relationship from the council to the community is paramount. We have to have the trust of our residents in order to make decisions that they know are based on what their wants and needs are, balancing that with private property ownership rights as well. So unfortunately, like Joe said, you know, that ship has sailed, but hopefully you're being heard by this council as to what you really want your neighborhoods to look like and the trust that you have instilled in every one of us in these chairs up here.
And if I may.
Sure.
We feel frustration sitting up here too, because the wheels of government turn extraordinarily slowly. You know, some of these decisions, the original annexation was 20+ years ago. You know, zoned to R1, and then of course the zone change was 4 years ago. And some of you probably didn't live here 4 years ago when that even happened. So it's certainly frustrating to you folks because you feel like you haven't been heard. You were misled, not by us, and it's frustrating to us too because we hear you. We can't stop the development now. It happened many years ago. So it's frustrating. I don't know if that helps, but it frustrates us too.
I'd like to add, though, too, it's not, I have no ill feeling or no begrudging against the developer for coming forward to request a zone change. That's well within their rights to do so. And as far as what they're requesting within the approved zone now. There's nothing that we can say that is ill intent or nefarious or trying to mislead or anyone. They're well within their rights to do what they're doing within the current zoning. And so there's no, negative or ill feelings from my part at least on what they're requesting. It's just part of kind of how this has played out over the last 4+ years that I think is frustrating for all of us.
You mentioned nefarious, and I'd just like to say, a couple times tonight we heard the comment that it was nefariously scheduled for election night. Folks, we have city council meetings every election night, and we schedule just based on what's coming down the pike. We don't consider, well, we're not going to hear this because it's election night. We have business to do, and even if it's election night, we'll do the business. So please be assured, there was nothing underhanded or secretive about scheduling the hearing like this on an election night. We do business on election nights, so.
May I?
Please.
Okay. As everyone has said, thank you so much for coming. I'm sure many of you remember watching me stumble over lots of things for many years trying to express my total and utter frustration with what has been happening in our city. And so the truth is, like it's been said, is that some things are set, don't get going for many years, and then based on the criteria that's been put in front of us, the council is unable legally to make decisions based on true and real issues that you're bringing up. What you're saying, the things that you're saying are not untrue, and the things that you're saying are not worth thinking about and not worth considering. Unfortunately, the question at hand tonight, we are not legally allowed, as expressed by our council, to consider those things in the decision that we're making, lest we put the city in a position to be open to costing the citizens more money. And that's really crummy. Honestly, I do want to reiterate and maybe be slightly more forceful than my council members in that there are loads of opportunities to make changes in these cogs that are turning, and it's not just when a piece of property that's next to where you live comes up. It's also when these criteria are reviewed. So the criteria that we're looking at and the ones that we look at for rezoning and zoning and annexation, those are all things that come across this room and all things that I would really, really ask you to look at and consider and come and speak on, because those are the opportunities that council has. And Mr. Mayor and Mr. Ziegler and Mr. Malloy all know that I spent a fair amount of time stomping my foot at that podium about many of these things, for better or worse. But really, those are the moments. Those are the moments to express that, so that we can use these moments to listen about other issues. But we're not allowed. We're not allowed to listen to anything else, and it breaks my heart because I want to listen to all of the things that you're feeling and living and scared of. I'm so sorry with the beautiful long dark hair that came up in the white shirt. You were talking about a lot of great points that I felt that you are concerned are going to affect your family in the near future, and I feel that too, and I wish that I had more leeway in this specific issue to make larger decisions. But because it was annexed and zoned and then rezoned, and because of the criteria that we are legally allowed to look at when plotting, other than asking the developer to make a commitment to what he is saying to us in council about what he's going to do with that land, I can't force him to do that legally. But I would like to say thank you for bringing up those issues, because I don't know, maybe I'm like an elephant. I hope I don't look like an elephant, but I don't forget. So I heard what you said, and I heard what the developer said, and the discrepancies, if they exist or therein, will not be forgotten in future hearings. So thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you. Anyone want to float a motion?
Move to deny the appeal at hand.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Stigleter.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes.
And just to clarify, so I guess the denial of the appeal and
Approval of
affirming the decision of the planning commission?
Correct.
Is that okay with the second?
Yeah.
Okay with the votes?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Next item up is unfinished business, returning ordinances and resolution. The first is the approval of Black Bay Boardwalk revisions.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Robbie Quinn, Parks Planner. Here seeking council's approval for the boardwalk revisions at Black Bay and those associated cost increases. If you recall, in about June, I believe I was back here for a project update, and at that time I'd mentioned that in January of 2024 we authorized Stancraft to go back out and do some additional test piles, because at that time they had a few concerns with the design and some of the lack of testing that was originally done 3 or 4 years ago. And so they, being new on the project, wanted to kind of test their own and see with their techniques what's really reasonable and how that may affect how the design was originally done. And so, there we go. So they ended up testing about 10 piles, and you can see kind of those circled in red throughout the footprint of the proposed boardwalk. And then highlighted here are the results of the embedment, anywhere from 0 to 6 feet. 0 were generally more towards the shore where it was solid rock and there's really no embedment possible on the rock. And then in general, the deeper ones are further out where they were able to get to 6 feet. And so kind of looking at these results and then going back, talking to our design team, our engineers, trying to figure out, you know, since we can only realistically get about 50% of the piles to a depth required, how's that going to affect, or what do we need to do to modify the framework to make this constructible? And so what came out of that with our engineering? One was additional piles, and that was needed to implement cross beams. So in the original design, these piles were going to be placed in a linear pattern, and that's how kind of the framing would sit on top of them. But because when they were out there testing it, they would pile it and it wouldn't go anywhere, so they'd move 2 feet and they could get embedment. It's kind of a little flexible, so by introducing the additional piles and cross beams, we now give them flexibility of kind of testing certain spots where they can move it with a few feet and still be able to put a cross beam across there and then hit another pile. And so then the joist would just run on top of those cross beams. So in doing so, that required additional piles to be designed and then the cross beams. And then also they looked at cross bracing. And so if we can get one pile in like a 4 quadrant to get to depth, they can then cross brace to the next pile by welding angle iron and such. So essentially they're only required to get about 25% for that scenario. And then lastly, installing dead man anchors, which are basically large concrete, like eco blocks of sorts, that get placed at the bottom of the shore. And then those get tied to the piles. So if a pile doesn't get embedment, they can use those anchors to kind of hold the bottom of it. And so while we were going through all that, that took about 10 months to kind of sort through different design ideas and come up with a solution. We knew that those were obviously going to increase the cost of the boardwalk. So working with our designers, we needed to kind of figure out what modifications we can make and still keep the look and the feel that we want, but be able to kind of rein in some of these overages. So the first one was removing a floating boardwalk. So that was sitting right about here. And that reduced about $50,000 right away off the bat. The second one was just in general reducing the footprint of the boardwalk itself. And so that took place in 2 locations. The first was this wing kind of heading south, which was going to run along the bay, or the shore, Black Bay. And that was designed, if you recall back on the master plan, eventually this would continue along the whole frontage of Black Bay. But obviously, given what we ran into with this portion, we don't really see that being feasible in the future. So it made sense to pull that out. And then this other piece right here didn't have a ton of effect on the overall feel, but it was able to reduce about 6 of the piles needed and the small square footage. And then lastly, we ended up pulling the boardwalk away from the shore a little bit, and that was able to reduce where a lot of the solid rock is, and then essentially they could pour a footing and install basically a permanent gangway onto the boardwalk. And so, again, the main thing was we didn't want to detract from the original design intent, and we feel like we still are capturing that by the shape. We're still directing people to kind of swim into the bay, creating a safer swim area and shielding them from some of the wave action along the river. We still kept the 2-tier platform with a ramp down into the water and this lower portion that'll be in the water, and then the 2 different textures and similar fixtures and railing, and everything is basically the same otherwise. And so looking at all the changes, the increasing to the structure and reducing the size, we still came out to a total over of about $95,000. So if you look, the original bid for the boardwalk and the floating boardwalk was about $771,000. So the new boardwalk with removing the floating portion came out to $866,000. So again, seeking an increase of about $95,000 this evening, and the modifications to the design.
Questions, Andrew?
Did the original bid come from Stancraft, or are they a new?
They're a contractor to Big Sky. So Big Sky is our general, and Stancraft is their subcontractor.
The main reason because of trying to find what you needed for the piles?
Correct, the embedment depth.
And it wasn't reasonable for Big Sky to know that it would be so difficult and so expensive when they gave the original bid?
Well, it wasn't on Big Sky. I mean, they took bids, and Stancraft was the only bidder that they were able to receive a bid from, because they're one of the few that do work in this area. So they were bidding the design. And this will be, sorry, I didn't mention, this will be out of park impact fees.
Nathan?
That was my question.
Okay. Any other questions?
So timeline, it'll still be planned, if approved this evening, to construct this winter, starting about February.
I'm sorry, Samantha, did you have another question?
I was going to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. I move to approve Black Bay Boardwalk revisions.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Westland.
Aye.
Stigleiter.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. Next up is the alcohol beverage fees discussion. Shelley, you running with that?
I am running with that. So we have had a couple other conversations about alcoholic beverage fees. One was in a workshop format, the other was here at a council meeting. I did have a couple of questions I wanted to read into the record that came from a council member. Really, the responses kind of flow along with what the memo was within the packet, so I think it fits well. So I'm going to read those, and then I'll take any questions from council that you might have. The first question was, I'm still unclear as to what the fees are actually for. In a workshop, we were told the proceeds go to the PD to help offset the cost of enforcement of alcohol-related crimes. During the last discussion at a council meeting, it sounded more like the proceeds were primarily used to cover the cost of administering the permits. Where is the money actually going? How much does it cost to administer the permits? And how much of that money goes to the police department? So within the first discussion, we did talk about enforcement related to alcoholic beverage crimes. And when we were looking at it, we said, really, this is a license fee, and that fee should go towards the cost of us actually issuing that license. And so during the second conversation, we talked about that we should be focusing on that and not so much about the crimes that might be associated with alcoholic beverages. Coming back out of that meeting, the council had asked us to evaluate what the cost was to issue those permits. And within the memo, we calculated those costs as about $250. Also, legal looked at it and said that $250 aside, you can statutorily charge that fee because the state has allowed that fee of the $567.50, I think is what it is. So we can legally charge a higher fee than the $250, but the cost to issue the license is $250. The total to the general fund right now for all fees associated with alcoholic beverages that include catering fees, the wine to go, the beer to go, the liquor fee itself is about $40,000 a year. And those fees all go to support the PD. The PD's budget in total is over like $10 million a year. So the second question was alcohol vendors are already required to obtain permits from the state and from the county. As far as I understand it, the city of Post Falls doesn't have any additional requirements not already covered by the state or county permits. Is that correct? And that is correct. So the requirements are the same. The licensures are issued from first the state, then the county, and the city. An applicant is required by the state to hold a city license. We cannot charge that fee if we so choose, but they are required to hold a license from the city. So we would be required to process a license fee even if we were not charging for that licensure. And so that license is required. I understand that, sorry, that second question led into a third question. I understand that applicants occasionally lie about having valid state and county permits. Is there a way to quickly check the validity of state and county liquor permits? If not, should we be lobbying the state and county for such a system? And so within my memo, we did actually recommend that we try to get a system that allows someone to fill out one application, and it could be processed through the state, county, and city to make things easier, not only for the applicant, but also even on the side of the state, county, and city. When we're calling and talking to the state's not, the folks who are administering the stuff down at the alcoholic beverage, I can't remember what they're called right now. ABC. They're not even sure. They have to go back and look at their regulations when we have questions from them. It's a very convoluted state code. And to us and to, I think, everybody involved, it would be much easier for them to not have to fill out an application with the state, get approved, go out and fill out an application with the county, be approved, and then fill out an application with the city and be approved. We had also suggested that if they're within the incorporated city limits, that perhaps they don't need the county license. It could just be state and city, and then if you're not in an incorporated city limits, you'd be the state and county. That again would take legislative change. So with that, I can take any questions that you might have.
Questions for Shelley?
Are we required by the state statutes to actually run the full application and background check, or we're just required to give a license? So we could just simply say, do you have your state and county license already?
Probably not required to run anything. I would think it's in our best interest to do so.
Yeah, I've heard
Yes.
anecdotally
Chief,
that.
do you have any, do you want to stand up?
Greg McLean, Chief of Police. To my knowledge, we're not required to do that background check. It's probably in our best interest to do that because we do find from time to time where from one year to another, the applicant has something go on in his past, or whether they got charged for over-serving or underage serving, which prohibits them from having that license. We've seen before where that is missed on the state side, and it's been missed on the county side, but we catch it during our process. So that's why we've done that in the past, and I would suggest we probably continue to do that just to protect us.
I guess I'd be interested in what those numbers actually are, because it seems like we're charging a lot for these liquor and wine, a lot more than the actual cost of the licensing fee. And then to the point of redundancy, anecdotally, I appreciate that you're saying that, but I mean, and which I think was requested in the original conversation as well, like how often do we actually see those misses by state and county officials?
I would have to go back and look at all
Yeah.
those past ones. There's been, to my knowledge, there's been at least a dozen that we've caught.
This year or like
Probably over
ever?
the last 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one a year. Okay, thanks.
Any other comments?
So if our licensing fee, $40,000 out of a $10 million budget is kind of a drop in the bucket for us, but I think it is proportionally more burdensome for small business to float those license fees all the time every year. So I would advocate for reducing that license fee as low as possible, basically to cover our costs, because I think it's also really difficult to determine direct costs of alcohol-related law enforcement based on the criteria that we have now. am I assuming, is that a correct assumption on how we determine those numbers?
That would be correct. During the workshop, we kind of talked about that,
Yeah.
that our numbers would not be solid as to, so a crime that is committed, we cannot necessarily directly relate that back to somebody purchasing beer at a convenience store.
Right, right. So I feel like there's there's not a real linear path between helping our community enforce liquor or alcohol-related crimes and how to delegate those to the purveyor. And any way that we can kind of relieve that burden, I think is in our best interest as a city.
I agree. I would advocate for putting that license cost at $250 as was reported in the staff notes.
I'm not necessarily opposed to changing it, but I'm hesitant, given that we had to take foregone to make our budget work this year. It doesn't seem like the greatest time to be cutting license fees here and there, because then we're setting ourselves up for another issue next year of taking foregone. I would like to see the budget hit a more sustainable level without taking foregone, and then maybe take a look at this. But my own take is that it's kind of ridiculous that a business owner has to go through 3 different licensing processes. But this requires state level reform, and I would love to see state level liquor license reform in Idaho. But until that happens, I don't see that we need to take any action.
For me, I know it's kind of in terms of the total city budget and everything else is a small issue. I very much appreciate what Councilor Ziegler said. It is a big issue to those who have to pay the fees. So personally, I'm not going to let it die. I'm inclined to renew the fees as presented for the next year. I think we should certainly lobby state and county levels for a unified system. I also think we ought to lobby that if somebody's in city limits, they don't need a county permit, and vice versa. Reduce the cost of doing business both for the city and for the business owner, and reduce the fees that we charge commensurately. Also, I would like to continue to see more data on how often we catch somebody, in our background checks that really shouldn't have a permit and so forth, so we can keep going forward with both eyes open. I mean, these laws didn't happen in a year, and we're not going to undo them in a year either. And I want to make sure that we undo them in a way that is sensible to everybody. A possible side effect is that if we cut down our fees basically to nothing and no other surrounding city does, then everybody who wants to sell beer is going to sell it in Post Falls right on the city limits. So I'm not sure if that's what the people of Post Falls want either, but I think a concerted effort between state, county, city to make things more efficient and lower the cost is in everybody's interest, including the city and the business owner. That's where I'm at now. So
I'll be odd man out here. I don't think I've ever disagreed with everybody. In general. 8-10 years ago, we started a wine distribution business. We created a job for our daughter while she was waiting to get into medical school. So we sold wine for 2 or 3 years. I paid the city fee. We were small. We never made a nickel. Like I said, we just created a job for her. The fee was not a big deal. And I think, we're talking $40,000 divided by all the retail outlets and bars. I don't think it's a huge amount. Again, I understand things are tough. Things are difficult, especially on the retail side. And it's not that I want to put undue burden on those folks. I just don't think it's that big a deal. That being said, I don't think I'm going to get a vote. But excuse me, but I just wanted to make my feelings known that I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. But if we can improve it, I don't have a problem with that. But again, when we did it, it was not that big a deal. So if someone wants to, do we need a motion on this, Phil?
Yeah, well, I guess if the motion, it is an action item, I think we should take a motion.
Okay.
Anyway.
I would move to approve the fees as presented for this year. And I guess as a sidebar, continue the discussion, perhaps quarterly, to see if there's any progress made with the state, discuss various ideas, that sort of thing. Every 6 months is probably fine too, but the motion is to pass the fees as presented for this year.
Second.
Motion second. Further discussion? Roll call, please.
Stigliter,
No.
Malloy,
Aye.
Ziegler,
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Motion passes, and I was right, I didn't get to vote.
So, Council President Malloy, we can reach out to a few legislators to see if they would be willing to carry something And if you want to champion that effort with
Yeah,
us,
I'm-
we could.
I'll be in Boise first for the Legislative Summit, 3rd of December, and we can work on ASC board, we can work through them as well. I will make a comment. At last meeting I was at down there, liquor license came up, and several people said, yeah, we've received states that we can charge X, and we're gonna charge X. So a lot of them were increasing it, so.
Yeah, and just personally, I don't like charging fees just because we can.
Understand.
So, yeah, I would love some guidance on how to champion that, what I'm legally allowed to say as a counselor, and what I can only say as a citizen, et cetera. I'm not sure those, but I'd be more than happy to put my name on.
And I'm happy
on
to bring
whatever.
that up to ASC level 2, so.
Perfect.
So, okay, so motion
We're good.
passed. Thank you. Next item up is the Water Reclamation Facility Tertiary Treatment Project, contract adjustment.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Andrew Arbini, Projects Division Manager for Public Works. I will do my best to keep my presentation concise this evening. So I am presenting on the Water Reclamation Facility Tertiary Project. This is a contract change adjustment with the contractor. This is being presented this evening because it exceeds the $50,000 value. So getting to the point early on, the summary of this is a contract increase of about $74,000. This adds heat trace to the project. This would be paid for out of the existing allocated project contingency. That was originally approved in 2020 at the time of contract award. Overview of the presentation. So I have a few background slides. These will look familiar. I'll talk specifics of the heat trace change order, and then give an update on both the project and on the contractual front, as well as providing some time for any questions and discussion at the end. So the project goals, the primary goal is that this project will meet the NPDES permit requirement. This is a familiar slide. This was presented in September when I presented on a related item. This has not changed. However, the contractor is nearing completion of the chemical supply system. That is a significant milestone in that will allow the city to use the tertiary clarification system, reaching a significant milestone, which in turn would allow the city to provide formal notice to DEQ of this significant milestone. Talking actual heat trace, so the original design of the contract included heat trace throughout several areas of the project, mostly in outdoor areas to protect equipment and liquids against freezing, areas that were prone to freezing. Additional heat trace was identified as being needed in several locations. This includes an outdoor chemical facility, equipment and pumps, as well as the roof line to prevent the roof from building ice dams and damage to the interior infrastructure. Overall, this contract adjustment includes not only just the cost to install the actual heat trace, but it's also the cost related to additional wiring, electrical components, circuitry to get the electricity to the locations that are needed. All in all, this is representative, in review of the cost, it appears that's representative of the scope and magnitude. This work has been completed on site, and we have agreed to the additional cost with the contractor. Providing some additional detail, the contractor has submitted a claim which includes this change order item. So the contractor submitted a claim for a handful of various items, includes this change order or this item for time. To back up a bit, a claim is really the first step of the formal dispute resolution process when we cannot reach a negotiation. That process, that claim process, is occurring in parallel with this. Staff is recommending approval of this change order as we agree on the cost. We believe that the time is being resolved through the claim process, and we will resolve that separately in that parallel track. Overall, this increase in the change order is within the project contingency, as I noted. there is remaining funds that would cover this additional increase. Touching on some of the most recent project updates. So since the time I drafted this presentation a week ago, installation of the membrane modules are complete. All 6 trains have all of the modules as designed installed. The membrane manufacturer is actually on site currently this week. They are testing each of those trains. So that is effectively putting it into automation, full auto. I walked out on site prior to this meeting this evening, and they were testing all the valves. So the water release, testing the full function of each train. It's anticipated that that work will continue through this week, possibly next week. We would start a clean water cycle and start that process. We are also nearing the completion of the chemical system. So that's the outdoor chem storage facility as well as the indoor chemical system that will allow us to feed chemical to both clean the membrane modules, but as I mentioned earlier, there's a portion of chemical that will also go to dosing in the tertiary treatment system. Completed portions of the project include the secondary treatment system. All improvements related to that have been completed to date, as well as the new UV facility that is online and in operation. And noted the tertiary clarification, we are moving water through that. The dosage of chemical will allow us to use it to its full intention. Contract update. So in some ways, we've had some movement since the last time I was here in September, in that we have been working through these contractual change orders as well as the claim process. To date, the city has not waived any of its contract rights. No new additions, at least formally, to date, have not been added to the contract. We are continuing to review contractor requests on its individual merits. So that looks like change orders for maybe an owner requested item where the contractor believes there's time. We are reviewing that based on the merits and whether or not that does commiserate with that request. And then in the instance of claims, any claims that are submitted are continuing to be reviewed in accordance with the construction agreement. It is anticipated that we'll have future updates as we continue through the project. It is staff's focus to complete the project as soon as possible, but without compromising the quality of the new infrastructure that's being put in place. It appears reasonable that in the month of November, by the end of this month, we anticipate that we will have some significant updates. At least that's the way things are looking today. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Any questions?
I'm a little confused on the timeline for this. The change order looks like it was signed on April 10th, and why are we just talking about it now if it was previously signed?
So I went back and forth in including that detail in my presentation or not. Thank you for bringing that up. That's a great question. And some background on that specifically. This issue or item was identified over a year ago. There was a fair amount of conversation that occurred between the contractor and the contractor's subcontractors in determining whose scope that was in. It took some time to work through the details of that, which ultimately led to it was not fully included in the design. So the original design did not include the amount of heat trace that we actually need. It took time to develop that change order. That was developed in April. We agreed on the price. The contractor, the process is that the engineer, the owner's consultant engineer will sign the change order, distribute that to the contractor for review and signature. It stayed with the contractor from April until just recently, 2 weeks ago. When the contractor returned the change order, it was returned as noted for the cost. However, the time, instead of 0 days, it was noted as to be determined. Okay. Since that is being included or reviewed as a claim currently, we are comfortable knowing that that is being resolved for the time component. So there was a delay in getting that return change order from the contractor. Since that time, the contractor elected to perform that work and install it without having signed the change order. So that work was actually completed between April and now. We are just now formalizing the paperwork surrounding that.
Okay, and is that why it's a claim because the work was already done before, it's not like we're just getting an addition to the bid?
The claim relates to additional time, and there's about 10 items that were included in a claim related to various contract change orders. This particular item, heat trace, was an item that was previously addressed in a change order, and that was the city's position. The contractor had a different view and submitted that through the claim. So I don't know if I'm answering your question entirely, but it's maybe a discrepancy in viewpoints that we agreed to the cost. The contractor believed there was time, and we did not agree to that. We did not view that. So they elected to pursue that through a claim, which is now being in the final stages, being formally reviewed.
It is hard to track the process of change orders and claims with all the parties involved and the times and things, so thank you.
The change order allows, it's really representative of a final resolution of an item, and most often we reach that through negotiation with a contractor. In the rare cases or not typical cases where we cannot reach a negotiated resolution, that claim process exists under our construction contract. That the contractor has their contractual rights to invoke that.
All right, thank you.
How much is left in the contingency if we approve this?
So all change orders known to date, it's about $300,000.
Any other questions? Entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the water reclamation facility tertiary treatment project contract adjustment for heat trace installation.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Stigleiter.
Aye.
Motion passes, thank you. I think we're getting closer to me buying Mr. Beecham a celebratory libation once we get this project completed. I thought I was going to have to buy it last year.
And Mr. Mayor, on the next agenda item, the vacation ordinance, I'd like to request that council continue that to the next meeting. There's some language that needs to be updated.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion seconds, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Stigleiter.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now we're down to new business, and it's the process to fill council seat number 6 vacancy.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This might be the shortest presentation I've ever put together. This is really intended to facilitate a discussion between you all about filling a council vacancy. So we now have a vacancy in seat 6. It was vacated November 1st. Idaho Code 5704 provides that the mayor nominates a replacement to fill that seat. This is the mayor's prerogative to figure out and select an appointee. The council confirmation is required of that appointment, and the appointed person is going to fill the remainder of the term, given where we're at in the election cycle. And so normally you just serve until the next city election. In this instance, the next city election is when that seat would have been up anyway, so we'll be filling, this person would fill the remainder of the term. What we're proposing for a process, this is modeled a little bit on what Coeur d'Alene just went through recently in filling a council seat. We would post notice of the vacancy and application first thing in the morning. We have it ready to go. It'd go on the website along with an application. We would accept applications for 10 days roughly. Once that deadline passes, the mayor would sit down and pick up to 3 finalists. Obviously, if there's only 2 applicants, it's hard to pick 3 finalists. So the idea would be to pick 3 for interviews with the city council. Council would interview those, likely at a special call meeting. It would be at a meeting, but it'd likely be a special call rather than a normal city council meeting. The mayor would then make a nomination, which would then come back to the council for confirmation. And ideally, we'd have a new person sitting in that seat by the 1st of January. Hopefully, that's kind of what we're hoping for as we start the new year. We've got some big things coming up with the comprehensive plan and some other things. It would be nice to have a full contingent of council members. So with that, that's everything I have for you. Happy to answer any questions and go from there.
I just say, historically, that's why I got on this council 26 years ago, was mayor brought forth my name, council confirmed, but especially in light of what Coeur d'Alene went through, I think for transparency's sake, I think I talked with Shelley Moore and Field, we decided it makes sense to open it up for application. So that's hopefully the goal.
Would it be cost prohibitive to put it in the paper? As opposed to just on the website?
We certainly can, and I don't know what the cost of that is. It's in the hundreds of dollars, but not in the thousands of dollars.
Okay.
Would be my guess. So it's probably not cost prohibitive.
And the only issue is that it won't be published until, I think it would be like Friday or Saturday's newspaper. So it would just be a little bit later than when it's open on the website.
I don't know how the other counselors feel about that, but I don't feel like, I don't ever go to, I mean, I go to the city website for things now, but it would not have been a regular destination for me at another time.
I get that. I'm hoping that the press will be reporting on
Let's
what
have
we're
a
up
press
to.
release.
That's probably going to get more notice than somebody finding it in our legal notices.
We did
would
get
be
a
my
press
guess.
release on the resignation, and I see Carolyn's left, but we can get that information to her.
Okay,
and
I think
maybe she-
that
and-
seems
and
reasonable.
I just want to tell you, you must be an antique like me, because I
Oh,
still,
okay.
I still
I was like, what are you gonna say?
I still like the newspaper, and I think we're in the minority. So,
Yeah.
But if that would work, I think if we would do a press release, that she would probably, the resignation got front page.
Yeah.
I believe Stephanie has a press release if we're going to
Perfect.
issue.
That would work as opposed to.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think just any way to let
Getting it in,
people
yeah,
know that they
I
can
agree.
get an application. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like a good process to me. I'm happy with it.
I would move to approve the process as presented.
Second.
Motion second, further discussion. Roll call, please.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Motion passes. Thank you. Thanks, Warren. Next up is for citizens' issues, and this section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council on a non-agenda item. Bob, come on up.
Bob Flowers. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council. Well, it looks like I'm a day late and $1 short on this one, but I would like to ask the council, since tonight they approved the annual Kootenai County Public Transportation payment, how much longer are the taxpayers of Post Falls going to help support a bad business plan? The public transportation, folks, is a great idea. They serve the community well, they do a lot of things. But anybody that's been in business can tell you, you can't continuously give away your product and not expect to get anything back. In other words, they should be charging a minimal fee or a nominal fee for these rides, but it's completely free. It's completely free, and the taxpayers of Kootenai County are paying a good chunk of this, which includes Post Falls. And I'm just wondering how much longer we're going to support a business plan that can't continue much longer. They had problems again this year. I remember the first year they brought it up in front of the council and came to you all and asked for money. Mr. Jacobson, you were there at that time too. And how much has that annual amount increased over the years? But still they won't charge even 50 cents for a ride on a damn bus. I mean, they need to generate income before they come to the taxpayers and ask us to give them more money. And I think it's time that the city actually asks them, when are you going to start supporting yourself? At least some, a little bit, before you give them any more money. Thank you.
Mr. Flowers, you and I may not agree on a lot of issues, But I think we kind of agree on this one, because when we had discussions on this, I think Mr. Westland just wrote it, so if he wants to make comments, I'll let him, because I know he had a good experience with CityLink. But when CityLink came to us 4 years, 5 years ago,
It's
we were
been a
having,
while.
well, no, this was when we were talking budget increases, and I raised that question. And I was told at the time that it would cost more to collect the money than the money they would collect. And I said, there's got to be a better way. And I haven't been at a meeting with CityLink for quite some time now. But I did ask that question, and I concur. I don't care if it's a token amount. Something's better than nothing. So, you know, I think as we go forward, well, it's kind of interesting, because there was an article in today's paper where one of the county commissioners said that I believe the quote was, it's time the city starts paying their fair share for CityLink. And I'm going to address that further later. But yeah, we're taxpayers, we're paying our share, and then the city's paying their share as is Coeur d'Alene and the tribe. But there should be some kind of remuneration, I believe, from the riders, but that's just me. Randy, you wrote any comments you might want to add?
No, just that, I know the future of the CityLink system is a little bit in the air right now. The county is trying to hand it off to the cities to run. And so I know we're going to be having some discussions at some point in the near future about what role should this even be playing in the city? What's our vision for it? How should it work? And I don't know what the future of the system is, but it's definitely time to be talking about it. So thank you for the comments.
Yeah. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none. Administrative staff reports?
We have none
None
tonight, sir.
Mayor and council comments. Council, on the 7th, we have a planning session, and I won't be there because I've got 4 meetings that day, including that night. But I am meeting with them. One of my meetings is I am meeting with those folks at 9 in the morning. So I'm not abandoning you. I'm just doing it at a different time. So I just wanted to get that out there. If you say, where's the goofball? He's not here. Anyway, so I hopefully that's going to bring forth some good information.
And that's open to the public, correct?
Yeah, I believe it is, yeah. Correct.
So that's a housing needs assessment at 6 o'clock in this room. So anyone that had comments about the future of what housing looks like in Post Falls, please, please, please come to that and make your opinions about that known.
Yeah. I've got one comment. I was mentioned this to city staff before. I was asked to bring it up during comments here. I think it would be a really cool thing if we had a kind of employee-themed Christmas party at the city, where we say this is for like city employees and their families, and we can host it as the council and have kind of an event to celebrate. Okay, here's what we're doing as a city, as we kind of working on this common mission.
I'm on a fixed income.
I want to see if you guys would be interested in putting together something like that on the cheap, right? Not a big
On the
deal.
cheap.
Anything we can bring city family together, I'm all for it.
Good idea.
I like a potluck. I don't know what you're
I'm open
envisioning
to suggestions. I
here.
mean, I think
Okay.
it's cool to have a bouncy castle and a whole bunch of kids on
Yeah.
it, but
Okay. Give me some ideas. I don't know what I think about it yet.
I think it's
we could do it as a potluck.
worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, for next year, since we're probably too close for this
Oh,
year.
yeah, yes, okay. Yeah. Can
I will
make
get
a
with
mo-
HR, we'll bring some
Sure.
thoughts and ideas back.
Go ahead, Smith.
For one, yeah, my schedule's booked until Christmas, so that's not gonna do. I wanted to say thank you so much, Mr. Beecham. I've been driving down Spokane since it's been open, and it's beautiful. So, good job to your team and any of the contractors that we used. That's great, so, yeah.
Anybody else? We do not need an executive session?
We do not, you couldn't have one if you wanted to.
It's true. Well, actually, we went down the hall before.
true.
So the next motion is?
Go home.
Adjourn.
All those in
Adjourn.
favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.